Hi guys! Tonight we're stepping into the complete history of spices, the tiny treasures that made kings dream, merchants lie, sailors gamble with storms, and ordinary dinners smell suspiciously expensive. Imagine a dark kitchen at dusk, a clay lamp trembling beside a bowl of crushed seed, the air warm with smoke, pepper, bark, resin, and something sweet you cannot quite name. Who first realized that a wrinkled berry or a strip of tree bark could become wealth? Who decided a pinch of fragrance was worth crossing deserts, mountains, and seas? So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And while you're getting comfortable, comment your location and your local time, because somewhere out there, someone is listening at midnight and someone else is making tea at sunrise. Now, dim the lights and let the room soften around you as you walk into a very old world where treasure does not always glitter. You're standing near a cooking fire thousands of years ago. The floor beneath your feet is packed earth, cool where the evening air has settled, warm where embers breathe in a shallow pit. You hear the small crackle of fuel, the scrape of stone against stone, the quiet murmur of people preparing food at the edge of night. Someone drops seeds into a mortar. They are not much to look at, honestly. Tiny things. Dry things. The kind of things you might sweep off a table without apology. But when the pestle presses down, the air changes. A sharp scent rises first, then a green warmth, then something almost sweet. It clings to your throat, it wakes your mouth. It makes plain grain seem suddenly less plain, which is one of humanity's oldest and most relatable ambitions. You lean closer, and there it is. The first great secret of spices: they transform. They make the familiar strange. They make survival taste like intention. Long before spices launched ships across oceans, they lived close to the body. They entered food, yes, but also medicine, burial rites, perfumes, sacred oils, and smoky offerings sent upward to gods who, apparently, had excellent taste. Ancient people did not separate flavour, healing, and holiness as neatly as modern shelves do. A spice could warm a stew, soothe a stomach, scent a corpse, honour a deity, and prove that the host had connections. Very efficient, slightly dramatic, deeply human. You move through an early marketplace, perhaps in Mesopotamia, perhaps near the Nile, perhaps in the Indus world where trade and agriculture already hum with quiet complexity. The air is thick with animal hide, river mud, sweating baskets, crushed herbs, smoke, and sun-baked clay. Traders sit in patches of shade. Their fingers are stained from handling resins and roots. Their scales are simple, but their attention is sharp. Here, value is measured not only in weight but in distance. The farther something has travelled, the more mystery it carries. That mystery matters. A local herb is useful. A foreign spice is a story. It says someone crossed land you have not seen, spoke languages you do not know, dealt with rulers you will never meet, and survived weather that had other plans. When a little packet of fragrance reaches your hand, it feels almost impossible that something so small can contain so much road. One mainstream historical fact rests quietly beneath your feet. Spices and aromatics were traded across ancient Afro-Eurasian networks, long before the famous voyages of European exploration. Egyptian records, Near Eastern trade, South Asian cultivation, and Mediterranean demand all formed part of a much older web. Pepper, cinnamon, cassia, frankincense, myrrh, cardamom, ginger, and saffron moved through ports, river towns, caravan stations, temple stores, and royal households. No single people invented the spice trade. It grew like a vine, twisting through need, luxury, belief, and appetite. You pass a temple courtyard at night. The stones still hold the heat of the day. Priests pour fragrant resin onto coals, and a pale thread of smoke climbs into the darkness. It smells bitter, clean, and golden. Around you, people grow quiet. The smoke makes the unseen feel near. This is not dinner. This is communication. In many ancient societies, scent was a bridge between worlds, rising where words could not. A pleasing smell could honour the divine. protect the dead, cleanse a room, or declare that something important was happening. Nearby, in a healer's room, bundles hang from beams. The air is dry and busy with smells: fennel, coriander, bitterbark, oil, old linen, warm skin. A patient lies under a woven cover while someone mixes a paste. You hear liquid poured slowly into a cup. The healer may not understand chemistry in the modern sense, but observation is powerful. Some spices stimulate warmth, some preserve food, some calm nausea, some mask unpleasant smells, which in a crowded ancient city is not a minor service. Let us give that achievement the respect it deserves. Then there is the quirky little tidbit, because history is never content to remain dignified for too long. In parts of the ancient world, cinnamon was surrounded by wild stories. Greek and Roman writers repeated tales that cinnamon sticks were gathered from the nests of enormous birds or found in strange places guarded by danger. Were these sincere beliefs? Merchant propaganda? Or the ancient version of my supplier is very exclusive? You can almost see a trader shrugging beside a pile of fragrant bark, letting the rumour do its profitable work. Historians still argue whether some early references to cinnamon meant true cinnamon from Sri Lanka, cassia from China or Southeast Asia, or a broader category of fragrant bark known through trade but not clearly identified. The words in old texts can be slippery. A name may travel farther than the plant itself. A merchant may not reveal his source. A scribe may describe a smell with confidence, and a botany lesson with less confidence. And so the past keeps a few of its jars sealed. You continue walking, and the world becomes larger with each scent: a seed from one valley, a resin from dry southern lands, a bark from humid forests, a golden thread plucked from a flower. You feel how spices begin as living things, not commodities. Pepper climbs, cinnamon curls under bark, saffron must be gathered by hand, tiny stigma by tiny stigma, which is the sort of work that makes you appreciate both human patience and expensive soup. In a royal storeroom, jars line the walls. Some are sealed with clay, some are tied with cord. The room is cool, shadowed, guarded by someone trying very hard not to look sleepy. The treasures inside are not only jewels and metals. They are substances that vanish when used: incense burned, oils poured, spices ground into food. Their luxury lies partly in their disappearance. You consume them, and the proof becomes memory. You touch the rim of a storage jar. It is rough beneath your fingertips. From inside comes the ghost of something warm, dry, and floral. Maybe it once perfumed a banquet. Maybe it travelled as tribute. Maybe it was counted by officials who took themselves extremely seriously, as officials have bravely done in every age. Around it, the machinery of status turns quietly. To own spice is to show reach. To serve spice is to announce abundance. To gift spice is to say, with fragrant politeness, I can afford to let rarity leave my hands. And here, under the soft veil of bedtime, you can sense the future beginning, though the people around you cannot name it yet. Every craving creates a path. Every path invites a guide, a toll, a bargain, a rumour, a rivalry. The spice trade is not born in one dramatic moment. It gathers slowly, like scent in cloth. It begins with pleasure, healing, worship, curiosity, and the simple wish to make food more alive. The fire sinks lower, the mortar grows still, outside. Insects sing in the dark, and somewhere a pack animal shifts its weight under a load that smells faintly of resin and dust. You breathe in, and the air is layered with earth, smoke, sweat, flowers, bark, and seed. It is calm now, almost ordinary. Yet inside these small fragrances lies a force that will tug at maps, unsettle kingdoms, and pull ships toward horizons no one has yet drawn. For now, you remain beside the ancient hearth. Someone offers you a warm bowl. Steam touches your face. The flavour is simple, but there is a spark in it, a brightness that makes you pause. The treasure is not gold, not yet. It is a taste, a scent, a little astonishment on the tongue. And in that quiet astonishment, the long history of spices begins to breathe. You stand at the edge of a forest where the air feels heavy, damp, and green. leaves shine under a pale morning mist. The ground is soft beneath your feet, springy with old bark and fallen rain. Somewhere high above, birds call in thin, bright notes, then vanish into the canopy as if they have private appointments with mystery. Around you, the trunks rise close together, and in their shaded skin lies one of the ancient world's most desired secrets: cinnamon. Not the neat brown sticks waiting politely in modern cupboards, not the friendly powder dusted over warm pastry with suspicious generosity. Here, cinnamon is a living tree. Its fragrance hides under bark, guarded by humidity, labour, and geography. You reach out and touch the outer surface. It is rough, cool, and ordinary enough to be almost funny. The treasure does not announce itself. It waits under layers. Workers move quietly among the trees. They know which stems to cut, which branches are ready, which strips will curl as they dry. Their knives make soft, careful sounds. A blade slips beneath bark, a strip lifts away. Fresh inner bark releases a scent that is warm, sweet, woody, and faintly sharp. It does not shout, it spreads. It settles into the air like golden dust. Cinnamon's early history is wrapped in uncertainty because ancient writers often use names loosely. Some meant true cinnamon, strongly associated with Sri Lanka. Others meant cassia, a related bark from regions farther east. A seller might not care to clarify, especially when confusion keeps prices charmingly high. A buyer in a distant market may know only that the bark smells luxurious and arrives from somewhere beyond the familiar edge of maps. That was enough. You walk through a coastal settlement where bundles of bark are drying under woven covers. The sea breathes nearby, salt and wet rope mixing with the scent of cinnamon. Traders inspect the curls with experienced fingers. They snap a piece, smell it, weigh it, then pretend not to be impressed. A good merchant must never look too delighted. Delight is expensive. The bark is packed for travel. It will move by boat, by cart, by hand, by memory. It may pass through South Asian ports, Arabian intermediaries, Egyptian storehouses, and Mediterranean markets. Each transfer adds cost. Each border adds a story. Each seller adds a little fog over the question everyone wants answered. Where does this fragrance truly come from? This secrecy was not accidental. For many centuries, merchants who profited from cinnamon had every reason to protect its origins. If distant customers knew the exact source, they might attempt to bypass the middlemen. And really, what is a middleman to do? Simply accept a smaller profit. Horrifying thought, so cinnamon travelled with rumours stitched around it. It came from dangerous valleys. It came from remote marshes. It was stolen from monstrous birds. It was gathered under supernatural risk. The stranger the story, the more reasonable the price seemed. Convenient? No. You find yourself in Egypt, where cinnamon and cassia appear among prestigious aromatics used in ritual, medicine, perfume, and embalming. The light is dry and bright now. The Nile moves slowly beside mud brick walls. Inside a workshop, the air is dense with resin, oil, linen, natron, and spices. Workers prepare the dead with calm precision. Scent matters here because the body is not merely discarded. It is cared for, preserved, prepared for eternity. Aromatic substances help resist decay, but they also carry dignity. They make the passage into the next world fragrant. A priest warms oil in a small vessel. The surface glimmers. A pinch of powdered bark darkens the mixture, releasing a soft sweetness beneath harsher resins. The room smells like heat, smoke, and old stone. You hear low voices, measured steps, the slight rasp of linen being folded. In this setting, cinnamon is not just flavour. It is part of a sacred technology of the body and soul. A mainstream historical fact sits clearly here: cinnamon and cassia were known in the ancient Near East and Mediterranean long before Europeans discovered their Asian sources directly. They appear in ancient texts as costly imports, valued for ritual fragrance and medicine effect and luxury. Their presence reveals the reach of early trade networks, even when the route itself was hidden behind commercial silence. You move onward into a Greek-speaking marketplace, where philosophers, physicians, sailors, cooks, and gossip all share space with impressive confidence. A man at a stall lifts a curl of bark and explains its origin with great seriousness. He may say that giant birds carry cinnamon sticks to their nests on cliffs. To collect it, people must place heavy chunks of meat nearby. The birds drag the meat to the nest collapses, and the cinnamon falls. It is a ridiculous story, but it is also strangely charming, and apparently useful enough to be repeated. This is the quirky fringe tidbit curled inside the spice itself. The cinnamon bird legend appears in classical sources, showing how exotic goods invited fantasy when real geography was unavailable or deliberately concealed. You can almost hear a sleepy listener in antiquity asking, "Wait, giant birds and the storyteller nodding, absolutely committed to the bit." Historians still debate how much these tales reflected genuine belief, literary entertainment, or calculated misinformation from traders protecting their roots. The answer may be all three, because human beings are very capable of believing, embellishing, and profiting at the same time. Ancient geography was not ignorance so much as patchwork knowledge. A sailor knew one port, a caravan leader knew one desert, a merchant knew one supplier. A writer in a distant city stitched these fragments into a world. In Rome, cinnamon enters a different atmosphere. Streets press around you, loud with wheels, sandals, shouting vendors, and water splashing from fountains. The smell is complicated, as Rome often is: bread, smoke, olives, bodies, wine, animals, drains, flowers, and expensive perfume worn by people hoping the drains will politely disappear. In elite households, cinnamon scents, wine, sauces, oils, and banquets where status must be tasted as well as seen. You step into a dining room where couches are arranged for guests. Lamps glow. Bronze dishes catch the light. Someone grinds spices with a slow circular motion, and the cinnamon rises through the richer smells of fish sauce, herbs, honey, and roasted meat. It brings warmth without heaviness, sweetness without sugar, distance without explanation. Every pinch says, "This table reaches beyond the sea." Yet cinnamon remains fragile as a luxury because it depends on trust. A buyer far from the source must rely on sellers, translators, weights, and quality claims. Adulteration is possible. Substitution is common. The line between true cinnamon and cassia blurs in smell, price, and language. You can imagine a Roman cook sniffing a bundle and wondering whether he has been cheated. He probably has. Not always, but enough to keep life interesting. The bark continues its journey through hands that never see the tree. That is one of the strangest things about spice history. Most people who loved these goods had no idea what the plants looked like. Cinnamon became an object of imagination before it was an object of botany. It was a curl of brown fragrance from a place beyond sight. The unknown made it more powerful. Evening settles over the market. A seller closes his jars. Dusk cools under the fading light. Somewhere, a small piece of bark changes hands for a sum that could buy ordinary food many times over. You hold a curl between your fingers. It is light, almost weightless. Its edges flake slightly against your skin. You lift it closer, and the scent deepens: sweet wood, sun, rain, distance. The secret roads of cinnamon are not marked on a single map. They are hidden in rumours, rituals, ledgers, temple smoke, kitchen steam, and the careful silence of merchants. A strip of bark leaves a forest and arrives as wonder. Along the way, it becomes medicine, myth, offering, perfume, source, and symbol. It teaches the ancient world a lesson that future explorers will remember too well when desire meets distance. People begin to move. You stand in a quiet kitchen at night, with the world asleep beyond the window and a row of spice jars glowing softly under warm light. The room is still except for the low hum of a refrigerator, the faint tick of cooling metal, and the gentle sound of your own breathing. Outside, darkness presses against the glass. Inside, the air holds traces of dinner onion, pepper, warm oil, cinnamon, maybe a little ginger left on the cutting board. You lift a jar from the shelf. It is small, clean, almost weightless. A simple lid, a printed label, a measured price. Nothing about it appears dangerous. Nothing says that similar scents once pulled ships into storms, filled royal treasuries, shaped colonies, stirred rivalries, and made merchants guard secrets with the dedication of people who had discovered that mystery raises prices. The jar looks calm. History, as usual, has excellent camouflage. You open it. The scent rises at once. Perhaps it is clove, dark and sweet, with that faint medicinal bite that makes the air feel polished. Perhaps it is cumin, warm and earthy, smelling of toasted fields and hot pans. Perhaps it is cardamom, green, floral, and cool, like a garden after rain. Whatever it is, the room changes. The fragrance moves invisibly, touching the walls, the table, your hands, your memory. Spice is tiny, but it never behaves as if it is small. A mainstream historical fact rests in this quiet moment. Spices helped drive long-distance trade for thousands of years and became one of the major incentives behind European maritime exploration from the 15th century onward. The search for direct access to pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and other aromatics encouraged voyages around Africa, across the Atlantic, and into the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Spices did not act alone. Of course, gold, faith, politics, rivalry, textiles, land, and power all mattered. But spice was one of the fragrant sparks that helped ignite a global age. You close your fingers around the jar and feel the smooth glass against your palm. It's cool at first, then warmed by your skin. The spice inside may have been grown by farmers you will never meet, harvested under a sun far from your window, dried in air full of insects and dust, sorted by hand or machine, packed, shipped, processed, blended, sold, and finally placed here beside your stove. Even now, when supply chains are faster and quieter, the old truth remains: flavor travels through human labor. The treasure that began as bark, bud, seed, root, resin, or flower has never been only about taste. It has been about distance. A spice carries the place where it grows, but also the places it passes through. Rain clings to pepper, volcanic soil lingers in nutmeg. Dry wind follows frankincense, river mud, dock smoke, warehouse dust, and kitchen steam all become part of the story. You cannot see these layers, but you can almost breathe them. There is a strange intimacy in that. Empires are large, maps are cold, trade statistics are sleepy little beasts, but a pinch of spice touches the tongue directly. It makes history bodily. You do not merely learn it, you taste it. Pepper warms your mouth, cinnamon sweetens your breath, chili sparks your lips, turmeric stains your fingers yellow and refuses to leave politely. Clove numbs the tongue just a little, as if whispering that comfort and medicine were once neighbours. A quirky tidbit belongs to one of the most ordinary objects in the room, the pepper shaker. In many modern dining settings, salt and pepper sit together as if they are equals, the classic tabletop pair. Yet salt is a mineral found in many parts of the world and necessary for life, while black pepper is a tropical vine fruit that became globally common through trade, empire, and agriculture. One came from earth and sea, the other climbed in humid forests. Somehow they ended up beside each other, like an old married couple on a restaurant table. History can be oddly domestic. Historians still argue over how much weight to give spices as a cause of global exploration compared with broader economic and political forces. Some emphasize spice profits and Europe's hunger for direct access to Asian markets. Others point to bullion shortages, religious competition, naval technology, state formation, and the search for prestige. The fairest view is layered. Spices did not single-handedly launch every ship, but they made the horizon smell profitable. And when the horizon smells profitable, people begin building fleets. You look now at a modern supermarket aisle. Bright lights shine on neat rows of bottles and packets. Ground cinnamon, black pepper, curry powder, Italian seasoning, chili flakes, garlic powder, smoked paprika, turmeric, vanilla, cloves, coriander, mixed spice. The shelves are orderly, almost too orderly. They turn centuries of danger into convenience. A person can buy a flavour once worth a fortune, toss it into a basket with soap and cereal, and continue walking. No caravan, no royal licence, no sea monster rumour required. Very efficient, slightly ungrateful, completely understandable. Yet the scent remains. That is the astonishing part. Systems change. Prices fall. Empires rise and vanish. Trade routes shift. Ships become containers. Ledgers become databases. But cinnamon still smells like cinnamon. Clove still darkens the air. Pepper still wakes the tongue. The sensory thread survives the noise around it. You sit at a table with a warm drink in your hands. Perhaps there is nutmeg on top, or cinnamon, or cardamom crushed into tea. Steam rises and brushes your face. The cup warms your palms. Somewhere in that little cloud is a memory of ancient temples, Roman kitchens, Indian harbours, desert roads, Venetian warehouses, Portuguese ships, island groves, Dutch ledgers, English trading rooms, plantation fields, street markets, family kitchens, and quiet cupboards. The history of spices is not only the history of exploration, it is the history of wanting flavour, wanting healing, wanting holiness, wanting wealth, wanting control, wanting to make ordinary life feel touched by somewhere else. Some of that wanting created beauty recipes, rituals, shared meals, gardens, poetry, fragrant rooms. Some of it created suffering conquest, coercion, monopoly, extraction, and violence hidden behind sweetness. The spice jar asks you to hold both truths gently. Now the kitchen grows softer, the light seems lower, the shadows kinder. You close the jar and set it back on the shelf. The lid makes a small, final sound. Outside, the night continues without hurry. Inside, the scent remains a little longer, floating in the air like a story that has finished speaking but has not quite left the room. You breathe in slowly. The world feels vast but not sharp now. It feels folded, like a map put away after a long journey. The spice routes settle into silence. The ships rest in dark harbours. The caravans pause beneath cold stars. The forests drip with rain. The kitchens cool. Across time, hands release seeds, tie bundles, lift sails, weigh sacks, stir pots, pour tea, and pass bowls from one person to another. And now, gently, the treasure becomes simple again. A little warmth in the cup, a little fragrance on the fingers, a little memory in the dark. The long roads fade. The sea grows quiet. The lamps along the harbour dim one by one, and the night carries the last soft scent of cinnamon, pepper, clove, and rain. You do not need to follow it any farther. Let it drift. Let it settle. Let the room become calm around you, until all those old winds are only a slow breath, and all those distant markets are only a dream. You arrive where the land leans into the Arabian Sea, and the air is thick enough to drink. The Malabar coast breathes in green layers, coconut palms, wet soil, dark leaves, river mouths, and hill slopes where pepper vines climb with quiet determination. Rain has recently passed. You feel it in the softness of the path, in the shine on broad leaves, in the damp cloth at your shoulder. Somewhere nearby, water drips from a roof edge in slow, patient beats. Black pepper does not look like empire at first. It is not a crown. It is not a sword. It is a vine with small round fruits, growing in clusters that hang like green beads. You step closer and see the peppercorns before they become black, before they are dried into the hard wrinkled sparks that will trouble accountants, excite cooks, and make distant nobles behave as though a berry has personally improved civilization. A farmer reaches up and touches the vine. His fingers move with the easy knowledge of someone who understands a plant in all its moods. Pepper likes warmth, rain, shade, and support. It climbs around trees or poles, rooting itself in humid soil. The leaves are glossy and deep green. The smell around the vines is not the sharp pepper scent you know from a table grinder. It is earthier here, leafy, wet, alive. The spice is still hidden inside the fruit, waiting for harvest, drying, trade, and gossip. You hear voices from the settlement below, where baskets are being prepared. The sound of woven canes scraping against packed ground mixes with the cry of birds and the distant hush of surf. The harvested pepper berries will be blanched, dried, sorted, weighed, and packed. As they dry, they darken and wrinkle, their scent sharpens, their flavour concentrates into heat, bitterness, brightness, and that little sneeze of arrogance pepper carries so well. A mainstream historical fact settles into this humid morning. India's southwest coast was one of the great ancient centres of black pepper production, and pepper from this region travelled widely through Indian Ocean and Mediterranean trade. It reached Roman kitchens, Middle Eastern markets, and later European tables in such quantities that it became one of the most famous spices in world history. Pepper was not merely a seasoning. It became a measure of commercial connection. You walk down toward a port, where the coast opens into a restless harbour. Boats nudge against one another. Ropes creak. Men shout over the splash of oars and the dull knock of cargo against wood. The smells are layered and strong fish, palm wine, wet timber, smoke, salt, ginger, pepper drying in baskets, and the sour, sweet breath of people working hard in heat. It is not a romantic postcard. It is better than that. It is real. Merchants inspect sacks with serious faces. Peppercorns spill into a shallow tray. A hand moves through them, checking size, dryness, colour. A few are crushed between fingers, and the smell rises at once. Sharp enough to cut through harbour stink like a tiny aristocrat refusing to share a room with fish. The buyer nods slowly, because nodding too quickly is how one loses money. Pepper's power comes from several gifts. It is small, light, and durable when properly dried. It travels well. It improves food. It fits medicine cabinets and kitchens alike. It can be stored, counted, taxed, gifted, stolen, and demanded. Very few plants are so cooperative with ambition. Grain feeds a population but is bulky. Fresh fruit spoils. Pepper waits in sacks, patient and profitable. In distant societies, pepper becomes associated with wealth because distance turns it costly. In India, it is a cultivated product tied to land, labour, knowledge, and regional trade. Along the sea routes, it becomes cargo. In Red Sea ports, Persian Gulf towns, and Mediterranean warehouses, it becomes imported value. At elite European tables, it becomes a mark of refinement. By the time it reaches a lord's pantry, it has collected so many tolls and profits that each pinch tastes faintly of bureaucracy. Delicious, in its own exhausting way. You pass into an early trading office and where scribes mark quantities on palm leaf or parchment, or memory supported by very sharp bargaining. The room is shaded, but not cool. A ceiling fan would be appreciated, but history has cruelly failed to provide one. A scale hangs from a beam. The weights are handled with care. Pepper must be counted honestly enough to keep trust, and creatively enough to keep profit. Human commerce, as usual, finds balance somewhere between ethics and opportunity. A quirky tidbit waits inside the story of pepper as money. In medieval Europe, peppercorns could be used in symbolic payments, rents, and legal gestures. The phrase peppercorn rent later came to mean a tiny, token payment. But the joke is that pepper was not always trivial. A single peppercorn might be small, yet pepper itself could represent obligation, status, and seriousness. Imagine paying your rent with seasoning and still having everyone nod as if this is perfectly normal. History does enjoy a dry little punchline. Historians still argue over how to interpret ancient claims about the sheer volume of Roman money flowing east for luxuries like pepper, silk, and gems. Some writers complained that Rome was being drained by foreign indulgence. But moral complaint is not the same as accounting. Were these reports accurate financial anxiety, political exaggeration, or the timeless habit of blaming social decline on other people's shopping habits? The debate remains open, and honestly, the shopping was probably impressive. You continue through the pepperlands at twilight. The heat loosens. The air smells of rain returning. In the distance, frogs begin their night music. Women spread pepper on mats before the last light fades. Children run past carrying small baskets. An old man sits near the doorway, turning a handful of dried peppercorns with his thumb, Perhaps judging the season, perhaps remembering another harvest when the rains behave differently. The spice is rooted in ordinary labour, this matters. The history of pepper is often told from the deck of ships or the tables of kings, but it begins with hands in soil, with vines tied upright, with harvest timing, with drying weather, with families whose names rarely enter chronicles. You feel the roughness of a basket handle. You hear the breath of workers resting at dusk. You smell smoke from cooking fires mixing with the clean sting of pepper. Behind every luxury is someone's long day. Pepper also becomes a political thing because whoever controls its movement controls profit. Local rulers benefit from customs duties. Port authorities regulate trade. Merchant communities build trust across religious and linguistic lines. Arab, Persian, Jewish, Indian, and later Chinese and European traders participate in networks that are practical, multilingual, and often more flexible than royal propaganda would like to admit. Trade is never just goods. It is credit, reputation, marriage alliances, ship repair, weather knowledge, and the careful art of not insulting the wrong person at the wrong feast. Now you stand on a ship as sacks of pepper are loaded below. The deck smells of tar, rope, salt, and dry spice. The hull shifts beneath your feet. The monsoon wind will decide when movement is possible, because even profit must obey the sky. Sailors watch clouds with professional suspicion. A merchant counts his cargo twice, then a third time. Because trust is pleasant, but arithmetic is safer. A sack is lowered into the hold, then another, then another. Each one looks humble, but together they form a dark, fragrant weight that can change fortunes. Pepper is not yet the whole story of exploration, but it is already a force that pulls people across water. It teaches empires to crave roots. It teaches merchants to guard secrets. It teaches distant diners that the world can be tasted, though never cheaply. Night spreads over the Malabar coast. The harbour lamps flicker. The wet air cools against your skin. From the hills, where the vines climb in darkness, the scent of leaf and soil drifts down toward the sea. You hold a single peppercorn in your palm. It is hard, wrinkled, nearly weightless. You press it gently between your fingers and feel how something so small can contain rain, labour, ships, arguments, appetite, and power. You step into a world where scent rises like prayer. The room is dim, warmed by small flames, and the walls seem to breathe with shadows. A bowl of glowing charcoal rests on a stone stand. Someone places a tear of resin onto the heat, and at once the air changes. Smoke curls upward, pale and slow, carrying a fragrance that is bitter, clean, lemony, and strangely bright. It is frankincense, and for a moment, everything feels quieter. The floor is cool under your feet. The stone has been swept smooth by generations of sandals. Outside, you can hear animals shifting in a courtyard, a faint bell, the flap of cloth in dry wind. Inside, the smoke thickens gently. It does not rush. It gathers around the lamps and softens the edges of faces. People speak in low voices, as if the fragrance itself has asked them to be polite. In many ancient societies, spices and aromatics were not confined to cooking. They belonged to ritual, healing, beauty, burial, and power. Frankincense and myrrh came from trees that grow in harsh, dry lands around southern Arabia and the Horn of Africa. Their resin bled from cuts in bark, hardened into golden or reddish tears, and travelled along trade routes toward temples, palaces, pharmacies, and homes. These were not casual smells. They were substances with status. You move closer to a resin trader's basket. The pieces look like small stones or dried drops of honey. When you touch one, it is hard, slightly waxy, and uneven. It leaves a faint scent on your fingers. Resin is tree memory, hardened sunlight. A little wound transformed into value. That sounds poetic, yes, but it is also practical. People cut the bark, the tree responds, the resin dries, traders pack it, priests burn it, physicians grind it, perfume makers blend it. The whole chain begins with a sticky bead on a branch. A mainstream historical fact rests in the smoke around you. Frankincense and myrrh were central commodities in ancient long-distance trade, especially through Arabian and Red Sea routes. They were used in religious ceremonies, embalming, perfumes, and medicine across Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Mediterranean world, and beyond. Their importance was so great that some overland routes became famous as incense routes, carrying aromatics from southern Arabia toward northern markets. You walk along one of those dry roads in imagination, and the temple air gives way to sun and dust. The sky is pale, the earth is hard, camels move in a line, their padded feet pressing softly into sand and gravel. Leather bags sway from their sides. The smell here is animal sweat, sun-heated rope, dry thorn bushes, and the faint sweetness of resin packed away from the light. Bells clink gently with each step. The caravan moves at a rhythm designed not for excitement, but survival. The people guiding it know wells, tribes, taxes, stars, and trouble. They know when to speak, when to pay, when to wait. Incense trade is not only about goods, it is about safe passage through difficult landscapes. A single bag of resin may carry the work of tree cutters, gatherers, caravan leaders, guards, brokers, scribes, and temple officials. By the time it burns on an altar, it has already passed through many hands, each one leaving no visible mark except the higher price. Humanity has always found ways to make fragrance complicated. You arrive in a healing room where the atmosphere is less grand but just as scented. Shelves hold jars of oil, dried herbs, powdered minerals, seeds, and bark. A healer warms a mixture in a small cup. You hear the scrape of a spoon and the soft cough of someone lying nearby. Myrrh, bitter and warm, might be used in salves, mouth preparations, incense, or embalming compounds. Saffron might be praised for colour, fragrance, and medicinal qualities. Coriander, cumin, fennel, and anise might soothe digestion or flavour remedies that otherwise taste like punishment in liquid form. Ancient medicine did not draw a clean wall between food and treatment. A spice could balance the body, warm the stomach, dry dampness, stimulate appetite, freshen breath, or make a medicine easier to swallow. Medical theories varied from place to place, but many traditions treated aroma, taste, and bodily effect as connected. You lift a cup and smell bitterness, honey, oil, and something floral. Whether the mixture works is one question. Whether it feels meaningful is another. Often, healing begins with the confidence that someone has chosen the right ingredients with care. A quirky tidbit waits in the golden threads of saffron. Saffron comes from the stigmas of crocus flowers, and each flower offers only a few threads. It takes a huge number of blossoms to make even a small amount. Because of this, saffron has been expensive for a very long time, and it has also attracted fraud. People have mixed in dyed fibres, other flowers, or whatever looked convincing enough under bad lighting. Somewhere in history, a disappointed buyer sniffed a bundle and realised he had purchased fancy hay. Tragic, but educational. Saffron brings you into a different scene of field at dawn. The air is cool. Flowers open low to the ground, violet against the soil. Pickers bend carefully, fingers moving fast but gently. The threads must be separated by hand. Your back aches just watching. The smell is delicate, earthy, honeyed, and faintly metallic. It is not loud like pepper or sweet like cinnamon. It whispers and somehow charges accordingly. Historians still argue whether some ancient references to saffron describe the exact crocus used today, related dye plants, or broader categories of fragrant and colouring substances. Old words can carry several meanings, and trade names are often stubbornly imprecise. A text may praise a golden spice without providing the tidy botanical label modern readers crave. The uncertainty does not weaken the story. It makes the past feel more alive, more human, and slightly less organised than museum labels prefer. You pass from field to palace bath. Steam clouds the air. A servant pours scented oil into warm water. The room smells of flowers, resin, wet stone, and skin. Aromatics belong to beauty as much as worship. Oils perfumed hair and clothing. Incense sweetened rooms. spices coloured fabrics and cosmetics. In elite settings, scent was social language. To smell costly was to declare refinement before saying a word. A quiet luxury. Yes, though not always quiet enough. Yet fragrance could also protect against fear. In cities where waste, illness, and decay were everyday realities, pleasant smells offered comfort and control. People burned aromatics to purify spaces, honour guests, prepare rituals, and ease anxiety. The invisible nature of scent made it powerful. You cannot hold smoke, but you can feel it enter your breathing. It changes a room without rearranging a single chair. Very efficient interior design, ancient addition. Now you stand again in the dim, sacred room. The charcoal glows red, resin melts, darkens, and releases its last bright breath. The smoke drifts upward, carrying human longing with it, the wish to heal, to honour, to preserve, to beautify, to reach beyond ordinary hunger. Spices and aromatics are not yet just luxuries of the table. They are tools for making meaning. You breathe slowly. Frankincense sharpens the air. Myrrh settles warm and bitter beneath it. Saffron glimmers in memory like sunrise caught in a thread. Around you, the ancient world listens to scent, trusting that what rises may connect Earth to something higher. The treasure of spices is not only in taste, it is in atmosphere, in touch, in smoke, in the quiet belief that a small fragrant thing can change the feeling of being alive. You enter Rome through noise first. Wheels grind over stone. Hooves strike the road in hard little beats. Vendors call from shaded stalls. Each one convinced his olives, bread, fish, dates, or wine deserve immediate attention. Water splashes from public fountains. Somewhere, a donkey complains with the tragic authority of a poet who has seen too much. The city smells alive, which is a polite way to say it smells like everything at once. Warm bread, smoke, sweat, wool, flowers, cooking oil, damp walls, animals, perfume, fish sauce, and drains all rise together in the morning heat. Rome is magnificent, but it is not delicate. It is marble and mud, ceremony and laundry, law courts and street snacks. It is also hungry. You walk toward a market where imported goods sit in guarded abundance. There are jars of olive oil from distant estates, amphorae of wine, baskets of dates, sacks of grain, and small containers holding rarer things. Peppercorns, cinnamon bark, cassia, ginger, cardamom, spikenard, fragrant resins. The packages are smaller than the grain sacks, but they draw careful eyes. A wealthy customer may spend more thought on a pinch of spice than a labourer spends on an entire meal, which is one of those historical details that quietly explains a great deal. At a stall, a merchant opens a box. A Drias-grey sharp scent escapes. Black pepper. The smell cuts through the market's heavy air with almost comic confidence. The merchant pours a little into his palm, letting the dark grains roll and click against one another. They look like tiny beads of power wrinkled from sun and distance. You touch one with your fingertip. It is hard, light, and expensive enough to make people suddenly interested in maritime logistics. A mainstream historical fact is plain in this crowded place during the Roman Empire. Spices from South Asia, Arabia, and beyond reach the Mediterranean through Red Sea and Indian Ocean trade. Roman demand for pepper was especially strong, and archaeological finds written sources, and trade manuals show regular commercial contact between Roman Egypt and ports across the Indian Ocean. The empire's appetite helped to link Mediterranean consumers to distant producers through a chain of merchants, sailors, tax collectors, and port officials. You follow the pepper into a grander neighbourhood. The street narrows, then opens into a house with painted walls, a central courtyard, and a dining room prepared for guests. Lamps wait in niches. Bronze vessels gleam. Cushions are arranged for reclining diners who will soon make eating look less like nourishment and more like a competitive art form. Roman banquets can be elegant, theatrical, and faintly ridiculous. Humanity did not need modern food television to become dramatic around dinner. In the kitchen, heat presses against your face. Cooks move quickly among clay pots, knives, mortars, and pans. The air is thick with steam, smoke, herbs, wine, vinegar, honey, and garum, the famous fermented fish sauce that Romans loved with heroic dedication. It smells salty, deep, and assertive. A cook grinds pepper with cumin and other seasonings. The pestle turns in a rough stone mortar, and the mixture darkens into a fragrant paste. You hear oil hiss as something meets a hot pan. A servant carries a platter. Another wipes spilled sauce before anyone important notices. The floor is warm beneath your sandals. Your fingers brush a linen cloth laid across a tray, slightly damp from steam. Pepper enters sauces for meat, fish, vegetables, wine, and sweets. Roman cookery often enjoys contrasts sweet with sour, salty with aromatic, soft with sharp. Pepper gives warmth and bite. It makes food feel alert. Elite Roman recipes known through later compilations often include imported spices alongside local ingredients. Not every household ate this way, of course. Most people lived on grains, legumes, vegetables, olive oil, occasional meat, and whatever their income permitted. But among the wealthy, spices helped perform abundance. A host could serve distance. He could put India, Arabia, and Egypt into a sauce, and watch guests understand the message. Subtle, not especially. Effective, absolutely. You enter the dining room as guests arrive. Their sandals whisper over mosaic floors. Perfume mixes with lamp oil. Wine is poured. Conversation drifts between politics, poetry, gossip, and mild character assassination, because a dinner party without gossip is merely digestion with furniture. A dish appears with peppered sauce. A guest tastes it and pauses, not because pepper is unknown, but because good pepper is a pleasure that travels with reputation. The empire's spice appetite had critics. Roman writers sometimes complained about luxury imports draining wealth from Rome to foreign lands. Their tone can sound familiar. Civilization was apparently doomed because people liked nice things too much. It is worth listening, but gently. Moralists often use food, clothing, and perfume as symbols for deeper anxieties about wealth, gender, empire, and social change. A spice jar can hold more than seasoning. It can hold panic about who society's becoming. A quirky tidbit appears at the table in the form of spiced wine. Romans enjoyed varieties of flavoured and sweetened wine, sometimes mixed with pepper, honey, dates, or aromatic plants. Imagine sipping a warm, sweet, peppery drink at a banquet while someone beside you quotes poetry too loudly. It might be delightful. It might be medicine. It might be both. Ancient categories were flexible, and after enough wine, probably very flexible. Historians still debate how widely spices spread beyond elite circles in Roman society. Pepper was imported in significant quantities, and it appears in recipes and texts, but access varied sharply by class, region, and period. Did modest urban households use pepper occasionally, or was it mostly the pleasure of wealthy kitchens? Were cheaper substitutes common? The evidence gives hints, not a full menu. Ancient trash heaps, shipwrecks, papyri, and cookbooks speak, but not always in a convenient order. You leave the banquet and walk toward the river warehouses. Evening has thickened. Torches flicker. Porters unload amphorae and sacks under the supervision of officials who seem spiritually nourished by paperwork. Cargo from the Red Sea routes may have travelled through Egyptian ports, crossed desert roads, sailed the Nile, and arrived in Alexandria before reaching Rome. Each movement means taxes, records, risk, and profit. The spice in a senator's sauce has already survived a small administrative epic. In a warehouse, the air is cooler and darker. You smell rope, wood, clay, old grain, and pepper sealed in containers. A rat moves somewhere in the shadows, professionally interested in empire. A clerk marks quantities by lamplight. The scratch of his stylus is small, but it belongs to a huge system. Rome feeds itself through conquest, taxation, farming, shipping, storage, and distribution. Spices are not necessary in the way bread is necessary, yet they reveal the empire's reach. Luxury travels along the same arteries as power. You step outside as night settles over the city. The streets soften, though they never become quiet. A baker works late. A fountain runs steadily. From a nearby home comes the smell of pepper, wine, and roasted food. Somewhere else, a poorer family eats a simpler meal, warm and filling, without imported extravagance. Rome contains both worlds at once, the grand appetite and the ordinary hunger. The empire's desire for spice does not create global trade by itself, but it strengthens the pull. Merchants learn routes, sailors study monsoon winds, Egyptian ports grow busy, Indian producers and middlemen profit, Arabian and Mediterranean traders adjust to demand. A Roman diner may think only of taste, but his meal belongs to a network crossing deserts and seas. Dinner, inconveniently, has geopolitics in it. You hold a peppercorn again, rolling it between thumb and finger. In this city of archers, aqueducts, soldiers, slaves, senators, cooks, and street sellers, the tiny spice feels almost absurd. It has no army, it writes no law, it cannot command a legion. Yet it travels where legions do not. It enters mouths, accounts, rituals, complaints, jokes, and memories. It makes the faraway intimate. The lamps burn lower. The dining rooms grow slower. The market stalls close their boxes, hiding fragrance until morning. Rome sleeps unevenly, full of dreams, debts, digestion, and ambition. In the dark, the spice jars remain still, small treasures from distant rain and sun, waiting for another hand to open them and let the world rush out. You stand on a dock before sunrise, with the Indian Ocean breathing in the dark. The water is not black, exactly. It is a deep blue shadow, moving under a thin silver line where morning is beginning to think about arriving. The planks beneath your feet are damp with salt. Rope scratches your palm as you steady yourself beside a vessel whose hull smells of tar, wood, fish, and old journeys. Around you, sailors work by lamplight. They move quietly, not because the harbour is sacred, but because sleep is still clinging to everyone's bones. Baskets are lifted. Clay jars are tied into place. Sacks of pepper, ginger, cardamom, rice, textiles, and incense are arranged with care. A careless load can shift in rough water, and the sea is already quite capable of causing problems without help from bad packing. The air carries many languages: Arabic, Tamil, Malayalam, Persian, Gujarati, and other tongues drift through the morning in fragments of price, prayer, complaint, and instruction. Nobody here needs a single empire to tell them the ocean connects things. The merchants already know. The sailors know even better. They have watched the winds turn with the seasons, bringing ships in one part of the year and sending them out in another. The ocean is not empty space. It is a road that moves. A mainstream historical fact lies at the heart of this harbour. Indian ocean trade depended heavily on the monsoon wind system. Seasonal winds allowed sailors to travel between East Africa, Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia with greater predictability. By learning when the winds reversed, merchants could plan long-distance voyages carrying spices, textiles, ceramics, metals, horses, incense, and ideas across an enormous maritime world. You board a ship as the sky warms. The deck feels rough beneath your bare feet. A sailor tightens a rope and glances at the clouds, reading them with the suspicion of a man who has met weather personally. The sail is still furled, hanging like a sleeping wing. Below, the cargo hold is dark and full of smells pepper's dry bite, ginger's warm sharpness, cardamom's green sweetness, oil, damp wood, and the faint animal scent of leather bags. When the vessel finally moves, it does not leap. It glides away from the dock with a slow creak, nudged by poles and current. The harbour begins to widen. Voices on shore blur into gull cries and water slapping the hull. The sail rises. Wind fills it with a soft boom, and suddenly the ship has purpose. You feel the motion first in your knees, then in your stomach, then in your breathing. The ocean is not smooth. It lifts and lowers you, as if reminding every passenger that trade routes are not lines drawn politely on a map. They are wet, uncertain, and very fond of making people nauseous. A merchant near the mast pretends to be dignified while looking slightly green. History does not record enough of these moments, probably out of mercy. The captain knows the route through experience, memory, and inherited knowledge. Stars guide the night, coastlines guide the day, Winds, currents, bird flight, colour of water, and smell of land all matter. Navigation is not one single trick. It is a body of attention. You hear the creak of the mast, the slap of the loose cloth, the low call of sailors adjusting ropes. Their hands are calloused. Their skin tastes of salt when they wipe sweat from their lips. This ocean world is crowded with communities that understand one another through exchange. Arab merchants carry goods and religious ideas. Indian merchants carry pepper, textiles, beads, and credit networks. Persians bring horses, silver, ceramics, and commercial links. East African ports send ivory, gold, tortoiseshell, and mangrove poles. Southeast Asian sailors and traders move cloves, nutmeg, camphor, woods, and forest products. No single group owns the sea, though many would enjoy trying. At a port along the Arabian coast, you step down onto sun-heated stone. The atmosphere changes at once. The air is drier, edged with dust and resin. Warehouses stand near the water, their doors dark and cool. Traders sit on mats, drinking sweet tea or something. Stronger depending on local habit and available patience. They inspect goods with careful hands. Pepper from India may meet incense from Arabia, pearls from the Gulf, textiles from Gujarat, and stories from sailors who swear the waves were taller than houses. Sailors are rarely accused of making storms smaller. A quirky tidbit floats through the port gossip. Some medieval sailors believed certain sea creatures, to spirits, or mysterious islands could appear and vanish in dangerous waters. Tales of magnetic mountains pulling nails from ships, gigantic fish mistaken for islands, and strange lights at sea travelled alongside spices. Practical sailors could be extremely skilled and still enjoy a terrifying story. Honestly, after weeks on water, a giant fish island probably helps conversation. Historians still argue over how much ordinary sailors understood the full geographical scale of the routes they travelled. Some likely knew only segments between familiar ports. Others, especially experienced captains and merchants, had broader knowledge stretching across seas. Written sources tend to preserve elite voices, official accounts, or later summaries, while the working knowledge of crews lived in practice, speech, and memory. The ocean kept many of its best teachers anonymous. You return to the ship at dusk. The deck is warm from the day but cooling fast. Dinner is simple rice, dried fish, lentils, perhaps a little spice if the cook has permission, or a talent for negotiation. The smell of ginger and pepper rises from the pot, comforting and sharp against the salt air. A sailor laughs softly at a joke you do not catch. Another hums under his breath, a tune from a coast now far behind. Night settles slowly as the sky opens into stars. There is no city glow to dim them, no modern engine to numb the sound of water. The ship creaks like an old house with restless dreams. You lie near bundled cargo, your shoulder pressed against rough cloth. Pepper sacks give off a dry, dark scent. Cardamom smells faintly floral, almost cool. The hull below seems to breathe with all the lands packed into it. Trade here is not only profit, it creates neighbourhoods in foreign ports, marriages across cultures, borrowed words, shared recipes, religious exchange, legal customs, and trust built over repeated seasons. A merchant may spend months away from home, waiting for winds to change. A sailor may know the taste of several coasts better than the fields of his birthplace. A spice may move with a prayer, a debt, a rumour, and a song tucked invisibly beside it. You wake before dawn to a new wind touching your face. The sail shifts. Men rise quickly, trained by instinct. The captain watches the horizon. Somewhere beyond it waits another port, another bargaining table, another set of smells, wet rice fields, dry desert roads, sandalwood smoke, fresh limes, hot metal, rain on stone. The monsoon does not simply push ships. It sets time itself for the merchant world. The sea brightens. Flying fish flicker briefly above the water like silver thoughts. A sailor points and smiles. For one quiet moment, no one is counting profit. The ship moves with the wind, carrying spices and stories through a world connected by patience, risk, and seasonal breath. You close your eyes and hear it all: canvas swelling, ropes humming, waves tapping the hull, cargo resting in the dark. The treasure is moving again. You leave the sea wind behind and enter a land of dust, bells, and patient footsteps. The road is not one road. Not really. It is a braided set of paths, tracks, shortcuts, river crossings, mountain passes, and market streets, stitched together by people who know where water hides and where taxes wait with open hands. The air tastes dry. Sunlight lies flat across the earth. In the distance, a caravan moves slowly, each animal carrying bundles that seem humble until you remember what is inside. Spices travel inland with a different rhythm than they do by ship. At sea, the wind decides. Here, the pace belongs to hooves, feet, wheels, weather, and endurance. Camels sway through desert stretches with padded calm. Mules pick their way through stone. Donkeys complain softly, as if history has personally inconvenienced them. Around their necks, small bells ring in uneven patterns, bright little sounds against the enormous silence. You walk beside a trader whose cloak smells of sweat, wool, smoke, and old campfires. His bags hold pepper, saffron, dried ginger, aromatic gums, and small packets wrapped so carefully they might contain jewels. In a sense, they do. These goods are light, valuable, and easy to divide. A pinch can be sold, a pouch can pay a debt, a bundle can cross an empire. Spices suit the caravan world because they carry value without needing a wagon the size of a palace. Very considerate of them. A mainstream historical fact follows every step. The overland trade routes, often called the Silk Roads, carried far more than silk. Spices, medicines, dyes, glassware, metals, paper, religious texts, horses, ceramics, and ideas moved through Central Asia, Iran, the Near East, India, and China across many centuries. These networks were not one continuous highway controlled by one power. They were flexible exchange systems linking many regions through relay trade, local expertise, and caravan cities. At midday, heat presses down until the horizon trembles. Sand and gravel crunch underfoot. The smell of animals grows stronger, mixed with leather, dust, dried fruit, and the faint sharpness of spice leaking from a loosened packet. The caravan stops near a well. People work without drama, because survival is mostly repetition done correctly. Water is drawn, animals are checked, loads are tightened. Someone curses a knot in several languages, which is one of the more universal forms of culture. You kneel near a basket and touch the cloth around a small spice bundle. It is rough, tightly woven, slightly oily from handling. When the trader opens it, a scent slips out. Warm and piercing, pepper again, but altered by the road. It carries dust now, or it smells of travel. Nearby, another merchant has saffron sealed in a small container, protected from damp, theft, and curious fingers. A little farther off, someone unwraps dried ginger, pale and knotted, smelling of heat and earth. These goods rarely move from producer to final buyer in one person's hands. Instead, they pass through stages. A merchant in one oasis sells to another bound for a mountain town. A broker stores goods through winter. A tax official records a shipment. A caravan leader negotiates protection. A shopkeeper in a city many weeks away sells a tiny portion to a physician, a cook, or a noble household. Every transfer raises the price and changes the story. By the time a spice reaches a distant table, it has been handled by people who may not even share a calendar. You arrive at a caravanserai as evening cools the air. Its walls rise from the plain like a promise. Inside the gate is a courtyard, with rooms along the edges and animals settling in the centre. The smell is intense but comforting in a practical way. Straw, dung, smoke, lentils cooking, damp saddles, human fatigue, and a soft trace of foreign perfume from a merchant's sleeve. Lamps flicker in niches. Voices overlap. The place is both hotel and warehouse, both gossip engine and security system. A cook stirs a pot over a low fire. The food is simple, but someone adds a pinch of cumin and dried coriander. The aroma blooms through the courtyard, and tired faces turn slightly toward it. Spices are luxury in palaces, but on the road they can also be morale. They make lentils feel less like surrender. You sit with travellers from different directions. One has come from a city where Buddhist monks debate in shaded courtyards. Another speaks of markets near the Caspian. A third claims to know a shortcut through the mountains, which everyone treats with the correct mixture of hope and suspicion. A quirky tidbit belongs to the caravan world of myth and warning. Traders sometimes told stories of deserts filled with singing sands, haunted ruins, or creatures guarding remote passes. Some of these tales may have been entertainment. Some may have encoded real danger-shifting dunes, bandits, poisonous animals, mirages, or places where travellers simply vanished because they misjudged water. A frightening story is easier to remember than a dry instruction. Do not take that route in summer works. The sand eats men, their work's even better, honestly. Historians still argue over how much direct contact ordinary traders had across the full length of Eurasia. The romantic image shows one caravan travelling all the way from China to the Mediterranean. But much trade likely worked by relay, with goods passing from hand to hand across regional networks. Some exceptional travellers covered enormous distances, yet most goods moved through many intermediaries. The spice itself might know the whole route, but people usually knew only their portion of it. You climb into mountain country, where the air thins and turns cold, the road narrows, hooves strike rock with sharp clicks, wind smells of snow, stone, and animal breath. The spices are wrapped tightly against weather, sacks are checked again and again. A fool here could scatter a fortune into a ravine, and nobody wants to explain that to investors with excellent memories. In a high town, markets gather beneath painted beams and awnings. Wool from the steppe meets tea from the east, metalwork from one valley, dried fruit from another, spices from warm lands far below. A physician buys pepper and ginger for warming remedies. A wealthy household buys saffron for colour and prestige. A monastery receives incense for ritual. A dye seller discusses pigments with the focus of a person who can judge quality by one suspicious squint. Taxes cling to the route like burrs. Rulers understand that moving goods can be more profitable than producing them. Gates, bridges, river crossings, and market stalls become opportunities for fees. Some are official, some are flexible in a way that benefits the person holding the spear. Still, traders continue. Demand waits at the end of every hard road, and demand has a persuasive voice. Night falls in the caravanserai again. You lie on a thin mat, wrapped in a cloak that smells of smoke and wool. The courtyard settles gradually, animals chewing, someone whispering, a pot lid shifting, a distant cough, the small sigh of wind over the walls. Near your head, a pouch of spices rests beneath a trader's arm for safety. Its scent escapes faintly in the dark pepper, ginger, resin, dried flour, warm bark. You begin to understand how inland routes change spices into legends. Distance did not merely add cost, it added us imagination. People who never saw the plant created stories to fit the price. A spice became a traveller with no face, arriving from deserts, mountains, and cities whose names sounded like dreams. The road made flavour mysterious. By dawn, the caravan is moving again. Bells ring, feet press into dust, the sun lifts, soft at first, then bright. You walk with the line of animals as the world opens into another stretch of road. Somewhere far away, a cook, priest, healer, or noble waits without knowing your name. The spices move toward them silently, carrying dry wind, market noise, mountain cold, and the slow patience of everyone who keeps the road alive. You enter medieval Europe through a wooden door that does not close as neatly as anyone would like. Cold air slips around its edges, carrying the smell of rain, mud, chimney smoke, damp wool, and animals bedded somewhere too close to the household. Inside. The room glows with firelight, shadows lean against the walls, a pot simmers over the hearth, and the steam rises slowly into the rafters, where old smoke has darkened the beams like memory. This is not a world of endless blandness, though people sometimes imagine it that way. Medieval food varies by region, season, class, religion, and access to trade. Many ordinary meals are built from bread, ale, pottage, beans, peas, onions, cabbage, cheese, fish, and salted or smoked meat when available. Fresh herbs grow in gardens, local flavour matters, but imported spices carry a different kind of meaning. They are not simply tastes, they are announcements. You stand near the table of a prosperous household preparing for a feast. The tabletop is scrubbed smooth, slightly sticky from use and age. Servants move in careful rhythm, setting trenchers, knives, cups, and cloth. In the kitchen, a cook leans over a mortar. The sound of grinding fills the room, stone against spice, steady and rough. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, ginger, nutmeg, grains of paradise, saffron. The air warms with sweetness and sharpness until the kitchen smells like a market, a garden, a pharmacy, and a treasure chest trying to become dinner. A mainstream historical fact sits beside the hearth in medieval Europe. Imported spices were strongly associated with wealth, medicine, status, and festive cooking. They entered elite kitchens through long trade chains connecting Europe with the Eastern Mediterranean, the Islamic world, India, and Southeast Asia. Spices appeared in sauces, wines, preserves, medicines, religious settings, and ceremonial gifts. Their high price came not only from rarity, but from transport, taxes, risk, and profit at every stage. You watch the cook prepare a sauce. He blends breadcrumbs with vinegar, wine, and spices until it thickens into something fragrant and bright. Medieval elite cuisine often loves layered flavours, sweet and sour, hot and aromatic, dark and golden, soft and crisp. Saffron stains a dish yellow and suddenly it looks richer. Ginger warms the mouth. Cinnamon sweetens without needing much sugar. Cloves bring a deep, almost medicinal perfume. Pepper pricks the tongue awake. The room is loud now. A dog noses, hopefully near a bench. Someone shoos it away with no real conviction. Logs crack in the fire. Rain ticks against shutters. A servant carries a platter past you, and the steam brushes your cheek. The scent is heavy, expensive, and slightly overwhelming. This is the point. A great household does not serve subtle scarcity. It serves abundance that can be smelled before it reaches the table. There is an old myth that medieval people used spices mainly to hide spoiled meat. You can feel why the story survives. It is simple, dramatic, and lets modern people feel pleasantly superior, which is a hobby with deep roots. But it does not hold up well. Spices were costly. Rotten meat was dangerous and unpleasant. People with enough money to buy imported spices usually had enough money to seek better food. Spices were more often used to display refinement, balance humoral ideas, enhance flavour, and mark special occasions. You walk into a physician's chamber, where the smell changes from cooking smoke to dried plants. Wax, ink, and bitter powders. A shelf holds jars with careful labels. Medieval medicine often draws on humoral theory, the belief that the body's health depends on the balance of qualities such as hot, cold, dry, and moist. Spices are not random luxuries here. They are categorized by their effects. Ginger may warm, pepper may stimulate, cinnamon may comfort, saffron may gladden the heart, at least according to some hopeful medical traditions. Honestly, after enough winter rain, gladdening the heart sounds like serious medicine. A patient sits near the fire, wrapped in a cloak, while an apothecary mixes a preparation. You hear the soft crumble of dried root, the tap of a spoon against pottery, the scratch of a quill making notes. The remedy smells sharp, sweet, and bitter. Whether every treatment works by modern standards is another matter, but the system has internal logic, taste, smell, digestion, temperament, season, and symptom are all connected in the medieval imagination. A quirky tidbit waits in the spice called grains of paradise. This peppery seed from West Africa became popular in parts of medieval Europe, especially when black pepper was costly or politically tangled. Its name alone sounds like it was invented by a marketing department with candles and a flair for drama. Grains of paradise. Not merely nice spicy seeds. Paradise. Naturally. People paid attention. Spices also feed the medieval imagination about distant lands. In books, sermons, travellers' tales, and maps. The East becomes a place of marvels, rivers of gems, strange animals, trees bearing wonders, islands of impossible wealth. Some descriptions contain real information, others wander cheerfully into fantasy. The further a spice travels, the easier it becomes to imagine it growing at the edge of Eden, guarded by beasts, gathered by mysterious people, or washed down rivers from paradise itself. Historians still argue whether medieval European demand for spices was driven more by taste, status, medicine, religious symbolism, or economic habit. The safest answer is that these motives overlapped. A noble might enjoy the flavour, want to impress guests, trust the medical qualities, and appreciate the spiritual aura of distant luxury all at once. Human motives rarely stand in separate little boxes, behaving themselves for scholars. You move to a great hall at night. Candles burn along the walls, their flames trembling whenever the door opens. Musicians play softly, pipes and strings weaving through the murmur of guests. The floor is strewn with rushes and herbs that release a faint green smell underfoot. The table is crowded with roasted meats, pies, fish, sauces, fruit preserves, and spiced wine. Servants pour hippocras, a sweetened wine steeped with spices and strained through cloth. It smells of cinnamon, ginger, and clove. Warm enough to make conversation feel wiser than it is. A lord lifts his cup. A lady tastes a saffron-coloured dish. A visiting cleric pretends not to enjoy the luxury too much. Across the room, servants watch everything while appearing not to. The spice does its social work quietly. It marks rank. It rewards loyalty. It honours guests. It turns eating into theatre. Yet outside the hall, the night is cold. A poor family eats a simpler pottage beside a small fire, flavoured perhaps with onion, leek, garden herbs, or a bit of bacon if fortune has been unusually polite. Their meal is not empty of taste. It is simply closer to the land around them. This contrast matters. Spices in medieval Europe are not everyday comfort for most people. They are distant, costly, and charged with meaning. You step back into the kitchen after the feast. The rush of service has faded. Pots soak, ash settles, the cooks are tired. The scent of spices lingers in the rafters like a warm secret. On the table, a few grains of pepper sit near a knife, overlooked but still valuable. A servant brushes them carefully into a small dish. Waste is not charming when the ingredient crossed half the known world. The medieval table turns spices into desire sharpened by distance. They are tasted, prescribed, gifted, taxed, praised, and misunderstood. They carry real flavour and imagined geography. They make food glow, wine warm, medicine fragrant, and status visible in the most invisible way through scent. As the hall grows quiet and the fire sinks low, you breathe in cinnamon, smoke, wet wool, and candle wax, and you feel how powerfully a faraway harvest can haunt a winter room. You arrive in Venice with salt on the air and stone beneath your feet. The city seems to float between water and money, which is a very Venetian arrangement. Dawn slides over canals the colour of pewter. Oars dip and rise with soft hollow sounds. Wooden boats bump gently against posts darkened by tide. From nearby warehouses come smells of wet rope, fish, tar, old timber, wool, wine, and something warmer, something sharper, something locked in small boxes because people behave differently around expensive fragrance. You cross a bridge and look down at a narrow canal. Water laps against brick with a patient slap. A boatman guides his cargo through the morning mist, his shoulders moving slowly beneath a damp cloak. He does not look heroic. He looks tired, practical, and very aware that a missed delivery can irritate men with ledgers. Venice runs on beauty, yes, but also on schedules, contracts, and the quiet terror of unpaid debts. At the docks, bales and barrels wait beneath awnings. Porters unload cargo from ships that have come through the eastern Mediterranean. Some goods have passed through Alexandria, Acre, Constantinople, or other great exchange points. Spices do not arrive alone. They come with silk, cotton, dyes, sugar, alum, glassware, manuscripts, metals, and news. But the spice chests attract a special kind of attention. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, ginger, nutmeg, mace, saffron, and cardamom are counted, inspected, taxed, guarded, and discussed in tones usually reserved for politics and illness. A mainstream historical fact settles naturally into the lagoon air during the later Middle Ages. Venice became one of Europe's major centres for the spice trade. Venetian merchants profited from connections with Eastern, Mediterranean markets and Muslim trading networks. Bringing Asian spices into European commerce, their advantage rested on ships, finance, diplomacy, naval power, and access to ports where goods from the Indian Ocean and overland routes could be purchased and resold. You step inside a warehouse. It is dim and cool after the brightness outside. The floor feels gritty with dust and salt. A clerk sits near a high window, writing with focused misery, because numbers are never asleep in Venice. His ledger records weights, prices, names, obligations, and fees. Nearby, a merchant opens a chest. The scent of cloves rises first, dark and sweet, almost medicinal. Then pepper cuts through it. Cinnamon follows, soft and woody. The room becomes a map you can breathe. A man lifts a handful of peppercorns and lets them fall into a scale pan. They rattle like tiny coins. In a sense, they almost are. Not official money in the strict way a minted coin is, but they move through trade with a value everyone understands. Pepper is compact wealth. Cloves are concentrated rarity. Nutmeg is a small oval invitation to overcharge. Venice knows how to listen when small things whisper profit. Outside, the Rialto market wakes fully. Voices rise over the water. Traders argue beneath awnings. Fishmongers slap their catch onto boards. Fabric sellers unfurl bright cloth. Bankers and brokers move with controlled urgency. The city's commercial life is not a side activity. It is the bloodstream. You hear coins counted, seals pressed, contracts witnessed, promises made with the solemn confidence of people who may later deny the exact wording. Venice's spice wealth depends on middlemen, and middlemen depend on trust mixed with leverage. A Venetian merchant might not sail to the forests where cinnamon grows, or the islands where cloves ripen. He might instead buy through networks shaped by Arab, Persian, Indian, and Mediterranean traders. Goods move from producer to regional merchant, from port to port, from customs house to galley, from Venetian warehouse to European fair. Every hand adds cost. Every hand claims necessity. And to be fair, many hands are necessary. The trick is persuading everyone that your own hand deserves the most. You follow a broker into a counting room where the smell changes to wax, parchment, ink, wool clothing, and faint spice dust clinging to sleeves. Here, trade becomes paper. Partnerships are formed, risks are shared, ships are insured, or at least comfortingly approximated. Investors buy portions of cargo. Young men from merchant families learn arithmetic with the seriousness of monks. Though usually with better shoes, Venice becomes powerful not simply by moving goods, but by inventing ways to finance movement. A quirky tidbit waits in the city's habit of public regulation. Venetian authorities often took trade standards seriously, inspecting weights, measures, and quality. Of course, this did not mean nobody cheated. It meant cheating became more sophisticated, which is humanity's usual response to rules. Spices could be adulterated, dampened to increase weight, mixed with inferior goods, or sold under misleading names. Somewhere, a buyer sniffed a suspicious batch of cloves and felt his soul leave his body briefly. Historians still debate how much Venetian dominance truly restricted Europe's access to spices, compared with the broader complexity of Eastern Mediterranean trade. Some older stories make Venice sound like a single greedy gatekeeper squeezing all Europe by the throat. The reality is more tangled. Venetian merchants were powerful, yes, but Genoese rivals, Muslim merchants, local rulers, changing wars, taxes, and shifting routes all shaped prices. Europe's frustration grew from a whole chain of costs. Not one mustached Venetian villain stroking a cinnamon stick. You walk along the waterfront in the afternoon. Sunlight flashes on the lagoon. The smell of drying nets mixes with roasting food and the faint perfume of imported goods. Galleys sit ready, long and lean. built for commerce but never far from war, a city that trades must defend routes, convoys, privileges, and pride. Venice makes treaties when useful, fights when profitable, and prays with impressive architecture throughout. It is a republic of saints, sailors, accountants, and extremely determined families. Inside a noble home, spices enter another world. A kitchen prepares a feast where imported flavours will announce refinement. A cook crushes cloves and cinnamon into a sauce. Saffron stains rice or broth golden. Ginger warms sweet dishes. Pepper sharpens meats and fish. The mortar's sound is steady, almost hypnotic. Steam touches your face. The air smells of wine, smoke, sugar, spice, and ambition-wearing velvet. Guests arrive by boat, because even social climbing in Venice requires water management. Their sleeves brush against carved chairs, candles flicker in polished metal, conversation turns to trade news, marriage alliances, church appointments, and rumours from the Levant. When a spiced dish appears, nobody needs a lecture. They understand the meaning. The flavour carries distance, cost, and connection. It says the household belongs to the world beyond the lagoon, but Venice's success also plants unease elsewhere. Northern European merchants grumble about prices. Kings and princes dislike dependence on routes controlled by others. Scholars pore over geography. Sailors wonder whether the ocean might offer a way around the crowded chain of Mediterranean exchange. Desire begins to look outward with sharper eyes. Pepper has become more than pepper. It has become a question, can Europe reach the source directly? Evening folds over the city. Bells ring from towers. The canals darken. Lamps glow in windows and tremble on the water. Warehouse doors close. Ledgers are locked away. Somewhere in the shadowed storehouses, spice chests rest in silence, still breathing faint scents into the wood around them. You stand near the Grand Canal and feel damp air cool your face. A boat passes, carrying cargo, whispers, and perhaps a little fraud tucked under excellent paperwork. Venice counts the cloves, weighs the pepper, taxes the cinnamon, and turns fragrance into finance. The city does not grow the spices. It grows access. It harvests distance. It proves that treasure can be controlled without ever touching the soil where it began. And as the lagoon rocks softly against its stones, the scent of the wider world lingers in the night, sweet, sharp, costly, and impossible to ignore. You stand on the western edge of Europe, where the land seems to hesitate before surrendering to the Atlantic. Portugal faces the ocean like a question asked again and again. The cliffs are pale under morning light. Gulls wheel above the surf, crying into the wind. Waves strike the rocks with steady force, sending up white spray that tastes of salt on your lips. Behind you are chapels, markets, rope walks, workshops, and royal ambitions. Before you lies water, wide enough to swallow certainty. The air smells of tar, pine wood, drying fish, sweat, seaweed, and smoke from small cooking fires near the harbour. Shipwrights work near the shore. Their tools bite into timber with hollow knocks. Men bend over planks, sealing seams with pitch. Sailcloth is stretched, patched, folded, cursed at and admired. A vessel grows slowly from wood and calculation, shaped for a world that is still partly imagined. Portugal's search for a sea route to India did not begin with one sudden heroic idea. It grew from geography, politics, trade hunger, religious ambition, and the very practical irritation of paying high prices for spices through long chains of middlemen. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and other luxuries reached Europe by routes controlled by many hands. Portuguese rulers and merchants wanted a direct path to the source, or at least to the markets nearest the source. Directness, in commerce, is another word for profit wearing a cleaner shirt. A mainstream historical fact anchors this windswept coast during the 15th century. Portuguese voyages gradually explored the Atlantic coast of Africa, supported by royal patronage and improved maritime knowledge. These voyages sought gold, trade partners, Christian allies, geographic knowledge, and eventually a route around Africa to the Indian Ocean. The spice trade was not the only motive. but it became one of the most powerful prizes. You walk into a room where maps, charts, and instruments lie across a table. The walls smell of wax, leather, ink, damp wool, and old smoke. A candle leans dangerously, as if geography itself has made it tired. A navigator studies coastlines drawn from reports, guesses, and careful observation. The map is not empty, but it is incomplete. Unknown shores bend into blank spaces. Islands appear with uncertain confidence. Sea monsters sometimes decorate the margins, because apparently even cartographers enjoyed a little drama when facts ran thin. On the table sits a compass, an astrolabe, dividers, and a ruler worn smooth by use. These tools do not make the ocean safe, they make it slightly less unreasonable. Sailors learn to measure latitude from the height of the sun or stars. They learn currents, winds, shoals, and the terrifying difference between a friendly breeze and a storm with emotional problems. Knowledge accumulates slowly, voyage by voyage, accident by accident. Prince Henry of Portugal, often called Henry the Navigator, is remembered as a patron of exploration, though the title can make him sound as if he personally stood at the wheel every Tuesday. He did not. His importance lies more in support, organisation, and ambition than in sailing heroic laps around Africa himself. Under Portuguese patronage, expeditions pushed farther down the African coast, building experience and commercial connections. You step into the harbour as sailors load a caravel. The ship is smaller than imagination wants it to be. Its deck is cramped, its timbers creak. Barrels of water, salted food, tools, trade goods, rope, and weapons take up precious space. The smell below deck is already unpleasant, and the voyage has not even begun. Anyone dreaming of exploration as a clean marble statue should spend 5 minutes near a ship's bilge and reconsider. A sailor coils rope beside you. His hands are scarred, nails dark with pitch. He may care about pepper, but he cares more immediately about water, pay, weather, and whether the captain is competent. Grand motives belong to kings and chroniclers. Ordinary men carry them in wet boots. The creak of the mast, the slap of waves, the gull cries, the rough wool against skin, the taste of stale biscuit. These are the real textures of discovery. The Portuguese edge southward along Africa, not by leaping into the unknown all at once, but by learning piece by piece. They pass familiar waters, then less familiar ones. They trade for gold and ivory. They encounter African kingdoms, merchants, pilots, and coastal societies with their own politics and commercial worlds. The story is not Europe entering emptiness. It is Europe entering networks already alive with trade and power. A quirky tidbit belongs to the feared waters near Cape Bojador. For a long time, European sailors imagined dangerous limits along the African coast, with stories of boiling seas, impossible currents, or waters from which no one returned. The fears were exaggerated, but not silly in context. Unknown coastlines, contrary winds, and poor information could kill. Still, the language of terror made the Cape feel like a gate at the edge of the world. Very theatrical, very inconvenient, and very human. Historians still argue whether the Portuguese drive south was shaped more by commercial greed, crusading religion, royal prestige, scientific curiosity, or competition with Islamic powers. The best answer refuses to pick only one. Motives overlapped inside the same people. A voyage could search for gold, gather intelligence, or spread Christianity, test navigation, and dream of spices all at once. Human ambition rarely travels with a single suitcase. You find yourself in Lisbon, where the river opens toward the sea. The city is busy with expectation. Merchants gather near the docks, listening for news. Sailors bring rumours from African coasts. Priests bless departures. Officials record cargo. Artisans repair gear. Families stand a little apart, because departures look brave in paintings and painful in doorways. In a market, imported spices still arrive by older routes, costly and limited. A merchant lets you smell pepper from a small pouch. Its dry bite seems almost mocking. There it is, the taste Europe wants, sitting in a hand, priced by distance and controlled by others. The Portuguese ambition is simple enough to feel dangerous. Go around the barriers. Find the sea path. Bring home spice without asking permission from every gatekeeper along the way. The ocean wind lifts the edges of cloaks and papers. Bells sound from a church tower. Somewhere, a ship's sail cracks as it is tested. You touch the rail of a vessel preparing to leave. The wood is rough, sticky with pitch, warm where the sun has touched it. It feels ordinary, almost fragile. Yet such vessels will carry enormous consequences. Portugal looks seaward because the land routes are expensive, because Mediterranean powers are strong, because spices are irresistible, because faith and rivalry sharpen ambition, and because maps always tempt the restless. The treasure is still far away, hidden beyond Africa's curve and the monsoon seas, but desire has learned to face west and south. At the harbour mouth, waves rise and fall, breathing against the shore. You listen to them and sense a door opening, not gently, but with the slow pressure of history leaning its shoulder against it. You stand on a deck where the Atlantic has lost its manners. The sky hangs low and grey, pressed close to the masts. Wind snaps the sail until it cracks like a whip. Salt spray strikes your face, cold and sharp, and the wooden planks under your feet tilt with a slow, stomach-turning groan. The ship climbs one dark swell, pauses as if reconsidering its life choices, then slides down into a trough of foam and shadow. This is the southern edge of Africa, or near enough to feel its power. The coast is not always visible. Sometimes it appears as a dark line through mist. Cliffs and mountains rising beyond white surf. Sometimes it vanishes completely, leaving only water, cloud, and the deep complaint of timbers under strain. The air smells of wet rope, pitch, sour clothing, stale food, fear politely disguised as discipline, and the endless salt of the sea. Portuguese sailors have been pushing toward this place for decades, step by careful step along Africa's western coast. Now the question becomes brutal and simple. Can a ship pass around the continent's southern point and enter the ocean beyond? The answer will not come from theory. It will come from swollen hands, torn sails, broken sleep, and men staring into weather that seems personally offended by navigation. A mainstream historical fact anchors this stormy scene. Bartolomeo Dias rounded the southern tip of Africa in 1488, proving that the Atlantic and Indian Oceans were connected by sea. His voyage opened the possibility of a maritime route from Europe to the Indian Ocean, even though later expeditions would still face immense danger, diplomacy, and distance before reaching spice markets in Asia. You grip a rope as the ship shudders, your fingers sting from cold and salt. A sailor beside you braces his feet wide, shouting orders that disappear into the wind. The sail is shortened, lines are tightened, barrels shift below, thumping against the hull like anxious hearts. Somewhere, someone retches with the honesty of a man who has stopped caring about dignity. Exploration is often painted as noble. On deck, it smells mostly like wet wool and regret. The southern waters are difficult because wind, currents, and coastline interact in ways that can confuse even skilled crews. The meeting of ocean systems creates sudden changes, heavy seas, and dangerous storms. Sailors who survive do not speak of the Cape as a neat turning point on a map. They speak of it as a trial, a place where the sea tests wood and nerve. It is no wonder that this region earns dramatic names. Dias first called it the Cape of Storms, according to tradition, which feels fair. King John II of Portugal is said to have renamed it the Cape of Good Hope because it promised access to India and the riches of the spice trade. The rebranding is impressive. Storms become hope. Terror becomes strategy. One suspects the sailors may have preferred the more honest label. You leave the storm for a calmer morning, though the calm feels temporary, like a cat pretending not to knock over a cup. The sea turns blue-green under broken clouds. Albatrosses wheel low over the waves, silent and pale. The deck is slick. Men repair lines, scrape salt from surfaces, check damage, and speak in quiet bursts. Their faces are tired, eyes reddened by wind. A cook opens a barrel of salted provisions, and the smell that rises is deeply committed to ruining breakfast. In this floating hardship, spice is an idea more than an object. Pepper, cinnamon, or cloves, and nutmeg. weight beyond distances most Europeans have never imagined accurately. Yet their value pulls ships through storms. The men aboard may never taste the richest sources of Lisbon's elite, but their labour carries the ambition behind those flavours. A noble wants spice, a king wants revenue, a merchant wants advantage, a sailor wants to live long enough to be paid. All these desires share the same wet deck. A quirky tidbit belongs to the naming of dangers at sea. Sailors often filled unknown waters with legends, omens, and monstrous possibilities. Some believed strange birds could signal land, certain currents could trap ships, and unlucky words spoken aboard might invite disaster. Even practical crews carried charms, prayers, and habits that made uncertainty feel negotiable. When the sea is larger than your confidence, superstition becomes a kind of emotional weather gear. Historians still argue over how much later accounts of these voyages reshaped events to make Portuguese exploration appear more orderly, heroic, and inevitable than it felt at the time. Chronicles were written with royal interests, religious meaning, and national pride in mind. They preserve valuable information, but they also polish confusion into destiny. The men on deck did not sail through a completed story. They sailed through doubt. You sense that doubt when the coastline bends away and the ship moves into unfamiliar waters. The familiar Atlantic rhythm begins to change. Birds appear differently. The swell feels altered. The crew watches everything. A floating branch, a colour shift in the water, a warmer wind, a smell from land carried far out to sea. Navigation depends on noticing details small enough to ignore and important enough to survive by. At night, the ship becomes a dark wooden shell beneath the stars. The air is colder than expected. You lie near coiled rope, wrapped in damp cloth, listening to the hull creak and the water slap in irregular patterns. Sleep comes in pieces. Someone whispers a prayer. Someone mutters about home. Someone laughs once, softly, at a joke too tired to travel. The cargo is not yet spice. It is hope, trade goods, instruments, and stubbornness. Then comes the greater voyage of Vasco da Gama, launched in 1497. You feel Lisbon far behind as his fleet follows the African coast, rounds the Cape, and pushes into the Indian Ocean. This is not merely sailing. It is a chain of decisions across months of hunger, sickness, repairs, negotiation, and fear. The ships stop along African shores where local rulers and merchants are not background figures, but active participants in their own commercial worlds. The Portuguese arrive as strangers seeking entry, not masters of a vacant sea. On the eastern African coast, the air warms again. Ports rise with coral stone, carved doors, mosques, markets, and cosmopolitan confidence. You smell cloves perhaps carried from farther east, incense smoke, coconut, fish, lime, sun-baked walls, and human impatience at foreign visitors who do not know the rules. Swahili city-states are tied into the Indian Ocean trade, with links to Arabia, Persia, India, and beyond. Their merchants understand the sea the Portuguese are just beginning to enter. Da Gama's expedition seeks pilots, alliances, and access. Misunderstandings multiply. Gifts that seem impressive to one side may look unimpressive to another. Diplomacy creaks almost as loudly as the ships. The Portuguese carry ambition, but not yet the knowledge required to move easily in this ocean. They need guides, they need information, they need winds. You stand again at the rail as the fleet moves across open water toward India. The monsoon fills the sails, the ocean changes colour beneath sunlight. Flying fish scatter like silver sparks. The smell of the ship remains rough bilge, smoke, salted food, unwashed bodies, wet wood. Yet the air also carries anticipation. Somewhere ahead are pepper markets, crowded harbours, and the possibility that Europe's long hunger for direct spice access may finally touch land. The Cape has been rounded, but not conquered. It remains behind, like a warning written in waves. It has allowed passage, not granted ownership. Around Africa's edge, sailors learn that the world is larger, harsher, and more connected than old maps admitted. Spices have pulled them here, but the sea has made them pay attention. As evening falls, the sail glows dimly in the last light. The ship moves on, groaning softly, carrying men between fear and fortune. You taste salt on your lips and feel the deck rise beneath you. Far away, pepper vines grow in humid shade, and cloves ripen in island heat. Here, at the ocean's turning, desire has found a route through storm, and hope smells faintly of tar, sweat, and distant spice. You arrive in Calicut with the sun rising over a harbour already awake. The sea is warm and restless, rolling in blue-green folds toward a coast crowded with movement. Boats slide across the water with practiced ease. Oars dip, sails loosen, ropes tighten, and voices travel over the waves in a dozen accents. The air smells of salt, coconut oil, wet wood, fish, smoke, ripe fruit, and pepper drying somewhere inland under a patient tropical sky. The shore feels alive beneath your steps. Sand gives way to packed earth. Packed earth gives way to streets where merchants, porters, sailors, brokers, servants, officials, and curious onlookers move through humid morning light. The cloth at your shoulder sticks to your skin. Sweat gathers at your neck. A breeze comes from the sea, but it does not cool so much as rearrange the heat. Calicut does not apologize for its climate. It has trade to conduct. This city, known to many foreign visitors as a great pepper port, belongs to a long-established commercial world. Its ruler, the Zamorin, benefits from maritime exchange. Muslim merchant communities play a major role in ocean trade. Hindu political authority, local producers, foreign traders, and port officials all share the city's complicated rhythm. The Portuguese who arrive here do not step into silence. They enter a room where the conversation has been going on for centuries, and they are late. A mainstream historical fact stands clearly on the waterfront. Vasco da Gama reached Calicut in 1498, completing a sea voyage from Portugal to India by rounding Africa. His arrival connected Europe and the Indian Ocean by a direct maritime route, but it did not immediately give Portugal control of the spice trade. Calicut was already tied to powerful networks linking India with Arabia, East Africa, Persia, Southeast Asia, and China. You walk toward the market, where the scents thicken into layers. Pepper bites first, dry and sharp, drifting from sacks stacked beneath awnings. Cardamom follows, green and sweet. Ginger adds warmth. Turmeric stains fingers yellow. Rice, betel leaf, sandalwood, areca nut, textiles, oil, and dried fish crowd the senses. A porter brushes past you carrying a bundle on his head, his feet sure on the damp ground. Bronze bells ring from a temple somewhere nearby. From another direction comes the call to prayer, thin and beautiful over the market noise. Here, trade is not a simple exchange of goods for coins. It is reputation, credit, language, partnership, tax, and custom. A merchant must know who can be trusted, who has ships, who has debts, who has family in another port, who can secure warehouse space, and who smiles too much during negotiation. Pepper may be the prize, but relationships are the road. You enter a warehouse where sacks are stacked in shaded rows. The room is cooler than the street, though still heavy with moisture. The floor smells of earth and old spice dust. A worker cuts open a sack, and peppercorns pour into a shallow basket with a droch, rattling sound. They are checked for dampness, mould, weight, and quality. A damp cargo can ruin profit. A poor grade can damage trust. A dishonest sample can start a quarrel that lasts longer than anyone's patience. A Portuguese envoy examines goods with fascination and frustration. His clothing feels too heavy for the heat. His gifts, chosen in Europe with confidence, seem less impressive in a city used to fine textiles. Gold, silver, horses, ceramics, spices, and luxury goods from across the ocean world. This is one of those awkward moments when one civilization arrives expecting applause and receives polite evaluation instead. Calicut has seen merchants before. It is not easily dazzled. A quirky tidbit lives in the early Portuguese misunderstanding of status gifts. Some accounts suggest that the presents da Gama's men offered to the Zamorin looked modest, even shabby, compared with what high-level diplomacy in Calicut expected: cloth, hats, coral, wash basins, and similar items may have seemed acceptable to Europeans preparing for contact, but in a wealthy Indian Ocean port, they could look almost embarrassingly small. History occasionally turns on the tragic difference between fine gift and is this all? Historians still argue over how to interpret the first meetings between the Portuguese and the Zamorin's court. Were the early failures mainly caused by cultural misunderstanding, religious tension, commercial rivalry with established Muslim merchants, Portuguese arrogance, or simple underestimation of Calicut's wealth and political complexity? The surviving accounts come with bias, pride, irritation, and hindsight. The truth likely rests in a crowded mix of all these forces. You move toward the ruler's court through streets bright with colour. People watch the foreign visitors with curiosity. Some stare openly, some laugh quietly, some continue business because ships arrive, ships leave, and strangers are only useful if they buy properly. The atmosphere is thick with expectation. Palms rustle above walls. The ground is warm through your sandals. Oil lamps burn in shaded interiors even during the day, their faint smell mixing with flowers and sweat. At court, etiquette matters. Who stands where, who speaks first, what gifts are offered, which interpreter translates which phrase, and how much patience everyone has left. The Portuguese seek spices and privileges. Local authorities seek profitable trade without surrendering control. Established merchants defend their place. The air is formal, but beneath the formality is pressure. Everyone understands that pepper means money. Nobody intends to hand over advantage with a friendly wave. You return to the harbour in late afternoon. The light turns golden on the water. Sailors mend nets. Traders argue near stacks of cargo. A child runs past carrying a palm leaf basket, laughing as a dog follows with serious professional interest. Somewhere, pepper is being weighed again, because pepper seems to invite weighing the way rain invites mud. The Portuguese ships sit offshore, weathered from the long voyage. Their hulls are dark, their crews strained by months at sea. They have reached the dream, but the dream has rules. Calicut is not a treasure chest waiting to be opened. It is a living port with laws, rivalries, prices, and people who know exactly what their goods are worth. The Portuguese have found the spice market, but not yet mastered it. Night settles with a warm softness. Lamps appear along the waterfront. The smell of cooking rises rice, fish, a coconut, tamarind, and spice. The market quiets slowly, never fully. You hear water slap against hulls, the creak of mooring ropes, low voices in the dark. A sack of pepper rests in a warehouse, guarded not by myth, but by commerce. You breathe in the harbour air and feel the world tilting. A sea route has been proven. Europe has touched India directly by ocean. Yet the first touch is not triumph so much as negotiation. Awkward and scented with pepper, Calicut stands confident, humid, crowded, and alert. Around you, spices move through hands that understand their value. The treasure is here, but it belongs to a world already wide awake. You sail east into waters where the map begins to feel more like a whisper than a promise. The air grows wetter, greener, more floral. Islands rise from the sea like dark shoulders under clouds. Some are volcanic, steep and misty, with slopes wrapped in forest. Others appear low and bright, edged with coral and white surf. The wind carries smells that seem impossible to separate: salt, rain, fruit, smoke, wet leaves, and somewhere beneath it all, the deep perfume of clove and nutmeg. You step onto a shore in the Maluku Islands, a scattered world of small lands that will become famous in foreign mouths as the Spice Islands. The name sounds charming, almost cute, as if the islands were arranged for a kitchen shelf. But here, under the hot sky, nothing feels small. The forest presses close, insects sing in a steady silver hum. Waves break beyond the trees. Your shirt clings to your skin. The soil under your feet is dark, soft, and rich from volcanic life. Clove trees stand with glossy leaves and pale trunks, their branches reaching into humid air. The spice itself begins as unopened flower buds. Before they bloom, the buds are picked, dried, and transformed into the hard brown nails that distant cooks and physicians will prize. Fresh from the tree, the scent is warm, sweet, sharp, and almost numbing. You touch a bud between finger and thumb. It feels tender, not yet the dried little spear found in spice boxes. It is alive, delicate and seasonal. A mainstream historical fact grows naturally from this soil for centuries. True cloves were native to a small group of islands in eastern Indonesia, especially in the Maluku region, while nutmeg and mace came from the Banda Islands. Their restricted natural range helped make them extraordinarily valuable in long-distance trade. Before plantation transfers changed production, these spices could not be grown just anywhere, no matter how much distant merchants wished otherwise. You walk inland, and the air thickens with damp shade. A nutmeg tree grows ahead, evergreen and graceful. Its fruit looks almost like a small apricot. When ripe, it splits open to reveal a glossy brown seed wrapped in a red lace-like covering. The seed becomes nutmeg. The red covering becomes mace. Two luxuries held inside one fruit, which feels frankly overachieving. The scent is warm, sweet, woody, and slightly mysterious. Softer than clove, but just as memorable. A worker cracks open the fruit with practiced hands. The red mace shines against the seed like a little flame. It is peeled away carefully, then dried until its colour deepens. The nutmeg seed dries separately. The process requires timing, skill, and attention to weather. Too much damp invites rot. Too much carelessness wastes value. In a place where foreign powers will later imagine only profit, local knowledge is everything. You hear village sounds around you, children calling, chickens scratching, palm leaves rattling in a wet breeze, someone chopping wood with a steady rhythm. Smoke from a cooking fire drifts low, scented with coconut husk and fish. The spice trees are not abstract commodities here. They grow beside homes, ceremonies, kinship, labour and memory. People know which trees produce well, which slopes drain properly, which season has been kind, which trader offers fair weights, and which outsider smiles too smoothly. The islands are connected to wider Asian trade long before European ships arrive with flags and demands. Javanese, Malay, Chinese, Arab, Indian, and other traders help move cloves, nutmeg, and mace through regional networks toward markets across the Indian Ocean and beyond. The spices may leave in small quantities from island harbours, then pass through larger ports where they join textiles, ceramics, metals, rice, forest products, and news. Their journey is not one leap. It is a chain of exchanges across a maritime world that already understands distance. A quirky tidbit hides inside nutmeg's later reputation. In early modern Europe, people came to believe nutmeg could help protect against plague, which made demand rise in moments of fear. Was it truly useful against plague? No, not in the way of frightened buyers hoped. But fear has always been a powerful seasoning. A small aromatic seed that smelled medicinal and exotic seemed more comforting than doing nothing, and doing nothing is very hard during catastrophe. Historians still debate how much early foreign accounts of the Spice Islands captured local political realities, rather than filtering them through commercial obsession. European writers often focused on cloves, nutmeg, prices, and control, while island societies had their own alliances, rivalries, rituals, and systems of authority. The trees were central, yes, but people did not live as footnotes to European appetite. The surviving records can make the islands seem like warehouses with beaches, which is both rude and inaccurate. You stand in a small harbour as rain begins. It arrives quickly, first as a whisper in the leaves, then as a soft roar on roofs and water. The ground releases a dark mineral smell. Boats rock near the shore. Men cover baskets with woven mats. Cloves must be protected. Nutmeg must be kept dry. A trader lifts a bundle and hurries into shelter, muttering at the sky as if weather might accept criticism. Inside a storehouse, the air is thick with spice. Cloves dry on mats, turning from pinkish buds to brown nails. Mace lies in curling strips. Nutmegs are sorted by size and condition. You run your hand over a pile of dried nutmeg shells and feel their rough surfaces. The scent is so rich it almost becomes texture. It coats the throat. It warms the head. You understand, for a moment, how distant buyers could lose perspective. A small island room smells like a fortune. Yet value brings danger. When foreign powers learn that cloves and nutmeg grow in such limited places, desire sharpens into strategy. Control the islands, control the supply, control the supply, control the price. It is a simple thought, and simple thoughts can be very dangerous when carried by ships with cannon. The peaceful scent of spice does not prevent violence. Sometimes it attracts it. For the islanders, spice wealth can mean opportunity, alliance, bargaining power, and trouble. Local rulers negotiate with traders who bring cloth, metal goods, ceramics, rice, and weapons. Communities may benefit from trade while also being pulled into rivalries beyond their choosing. The spice trees root people in place, but their fragrance pulls strangers from across the world. Evening settles after the rain. Mist rises from the slopes. The forest gleams. Somewhere, a clove tree releases its scent into cooling air. You sit near a doorway, listening to waves, insects, and voices softened by distance. A bowl of food rests in your hands, warm through the clay. It is seasoned lightly, not extravagantly, because abundance at the source does not mean carelessness. The flavour is deep, fresh, and local. You look toward the dark line of the sea. Beyond it, merchants dream, kings calculate, and sailors argue with wind. But here, the treasure grows quietly from volcanic soil. Cloves begin as buds. Nutmeg hides in fruit. Mace curls like red lace in humid light. The world will call these islands remote, but that is only because the world enjoys placing itself at the centre. From here, the centre smells of rain, smoke, flowers, and spice. You stand on a Spanish dock where the Atlantic wind pulls at cloaks, sails, and ambitions with equal enthusiasm. The harbour is busy in the restless way harbours always are when someone has convinced money to become a voyage. Barrels roll over planks. Ropes scrape against wood. Sailors shout over gulls. The air smells of salt, tar, oranges, damp wool, garlic, horse sweat, and the nervous hope of people pretending they know exactly where they're going. Spain looks west because the east is crowded with rivals, old routes, high prices, and complicated politics. Spice has become a dream with a direction, but not everyone agrees on the direction. Some believe the riches of Asia can be reached by sailing toward the setting sun. It sounds bold. It also sounds like the kind of idea that becomes more persuasive when maps are incomplete, and investors are tired of hearing no. You watch Christopher Columbus prepare for a voyage in 1492. He's not searching for a new continent. He believes he can reach Asia by crossing the Atlantic. The calculation is wrong, but wrong calculations can still change the world, which is frankly unfair to everyone who double-checks their work. Around him, sailors load supplies hard biscuit, salted meat, beans, wine, water, tools, trade goods, and the private fears they do not list in the cargo. A mainstream historical fact rises with the morning tide Columbus sailed west, under Spanish sponsorship, hoping to reach Asia's wealth, including spices, but instead encountered Caribbean lands unknown to Europeans. His voyages began sustained contact between Europe and the Americas, while the original spice goal remained unresolved. Spain had not found the Clove Islands or pepper ports by sailing west, but it had opened a vast and disruptive new chapter in global history. You board one of the small ships and feel how little separates you from the ocean. The deck is cramped. The rail is rough beneath your hand. The sailcloth snaps above like a restless wing. Below, the hold is dark, close, and sour with stored food, wood, rope, and bilge water. The sea ahead is enormous, blue and indifferent. It does not care whether your theory is elegant. Days pass in a slow rhythm of creaking timber, shifting wind, prayers, boredom, and suspicion. The sailors hear water slap the hull through the night. They smell pitch, warming in the sun. Their clothes grow stiff with salt. Flying fish flicker over the waves. Seaweed drifts past, making men wonder whether land is near. Hope is a delicate thing at sea. It rises every morning, then gets soaked by uncertainty by noon. When land appears, it is green, bright, and scented with unfamiliar life. You step into warm air filled with flowers, wet leaves, smoke, and soil after rain. Birds call from trees you cannot name. The sand is pale underfoot. The people who live here have their own worlds, foods, roots, beliefs, and histories. They are not waiting to become someone else's discovery. Yet European accounts will often place them inside a story built around Spain's desire, not their own reality. Columbus searches for signs of Asia. He asks about gold, rulers, trade, and spices. He finds new plants, new foods, new languages, new islands, but not the spice markets he imagined. Some local peppers, especially varieties of chili from the Americas, catch European attention. They are fiery, colourful, and very different from black pepper. The name pepper gets stretched onto them because humans enjoy naming new things after old cravings. Helpful, sometimes. Botanically tidy, not really. A quirky tidbit belongs to this confusion chili peppers, native to the Americas, spread rapidly across the world after European contact, and eventually transformed cuisines in India, China, Southeast Asia, Korea, Hungary, West Africa, and beyond. The funny twist is that Europe went west chasing Asian spices and helped launch a new global spice revolution from the Americas. History does enjoy placing the punchline several oceans away. Historians still argue over how much Columbus personally believed he had reached the edges of Asia during different stages of his voyages, and how much his language was shaped by politics, pride, and the need to satisfy sponsors. His writings mix observation, hope, error, and persuasion. The documents do not always let you separate belief from salesmanship cleanly. Exploration, like trade, often comes with a polished version for investors. You move forward in time to another Spanish effort, wider and harsher. Ferdinand Magellan's expedition leaves in 1519 with a clear aim: reach the Spice Islands by sailing west. The harbour mood is familiar, but the stakes feel sharper. The ships carry men from several backgrounds, along with food, weapons, trade goods, and maps that do not yet understand the full size of the Pacific. The ocean, as usual, is not offended by human ignorance. It simply waits. The expedition crosses the Atlantic, searches the coast of South America, and enters a cold, twisting passage that will later bear Magellan's name. You feel the temperature drop. The air smells of ice, wet stone, smoke, and fear. Mountains rise dark on either side. Wind screams through narrow channels. The ships move carefully through a maze of water and rock. Men look toward shorelines that seem empty, then see fires in the distance. Small orange points in the vast gloom. Beyond the strait lies the Pacific, named for its calm appearance, which is one of history's more optimistic branding choices. The crossing becomes a nightmare of distance. Food rots, water fouls, hunger gnaws. The deck smells of sickness, damp wood, stale crumbs, and exhausted bodies. The sea stretches on, blue beyond reason. The men had imagined an ocean. They had not imagined this much ocean. Maps had been too kind. Magellan does not reach Spain again. He dies in the Philippines in 1521, far from the courtly dreams that launched the voyage. Yet one ship, the Victoria, eventually returns to Spain in 1522 under Juan Sebastian Elcano, completing the first circumnavigation of the globe. It carries cloves from the Spice Islands, proof of both success and devastation. The voyage shows that the world can be encircled by sea, but also that knowledge can demand a terrible human price. You stand near the returning ship, battered and salt-worn, as it enters harbour with a reduced crew. The smell is overwhelming old wood, sickness, spice, salt, and survival. The cloves aboard are fragrant evidence that the westward route can touch the spice world, though not easily, not cheaply, and not in the neat way dreamers promised. A small cargo of spice has become a measurement of the planet. Spain's westward chase redraws more than maps. It links oceans into one global arena. It brings the Americas into European imperial competition. It spreads new crops, diseases, animals, metals, faiths, violence, and exchanges across continents. Spices of allure, but the result is far larger and far more tangled than seasoning. Tiny cloves and imagined pepper roots help bend history toward a connected world. Beautiful in motion and often brutal in consequence, Evening settles over the harbour. The sails hang tired. Bells ring in the distance. You hold the scent of clove in the air, dark and sweet, while the Atlantic murmurs against the quay. Spain chased Asia by sailing west and found not a shortcut, but a planet. The treasure was real, yet the route revealed something greater and more unsettling. The world was round, wide, inhabited, contested, and no longer able to remain unknown to itself. You stand before a stone fortress on the edge of the sea, and the first thing you notice is how badly it wants to be noticed. Its walls rise pale and blunt above the harbour, square-shouldered against wind, waves, and anyone with inconvenient commercial plans. Cannon mouths stare outward from the battlements. Flags snap in the heat. Below, the water flashes blue, harmless-looking in that charming way water has before it ruins something. The air smells of salt, lime-washed stone, hot metal, old smoke, tar, and pepper dust drifting from nearby warehouses. Soldiers move along the walls with bored vigilance. Clerks sit in shaded rooms, writing letters, copying orders, recording cargo, and proving once again that empire is not only built by men with swords, but also by men who refuse to misplace receipts. This is the Portuguese Estado da India, the overseas imperial system built around fortified ports, naval patrols, trade privileges, diplomacy, and force across the Indian Ocean. It is not a land empire stretching evenly across territories. It is more like a chain of hard knots tied along sea routes Goa, Cochin, Hormuz, Malacca, Mozambique, and other strategic places where ships can be watched, taxed, repaired, threatened, welcomed, all of these in one exhausting afternoon. A mainstream historical fact stands inside these walls in the 16th century. Portugal tried to control key points of the Indian Ocean spice trade through forts, armed ships, royal officials, and a pass system known as the cartas. Ships without Portuguese permission could be stopped or attacked, especially if they threatened Portuguese commercial interests. This system aimed to redirect profits toward Portuguese hands, though it never fully controlled the vast ocean trade. You walk through a gate into a courtyard where stone radiates heat through your sandals. A blacksmith hammers metal near a wall, each strike ringing into the glare. Sailors unload barrels. A priest crosses the yard with measured steps. A local interpreter speaks with a Portuguese officer, both men watching each other carefully. The fort is not simply European stone dropped into Asian space. It depends on local labour, local food, local knowledge, translators, alliances, rivalries, and compromise. Without those, walls are just expensive scenery. In the warehouse, the atmosphere becomes darker and richer. Pepper sacks are stacked in high rows. Ginger lies in bundles. Cinnamon bark sits tied in fragrant rolls. Cardamom, cloves, nutmeg, mace, and other goods wait in smaller containers, guarded more carefully. The smell is dense enough to feel like cloth over your face sharp pepper, sweet bark, warm resin, damp wood, old rope, and human sweat. A clerk marks quantities in a ledger. He dips his pen, pauses, scratches numbers onto paper, and in that small sound you hear the machinery of control. Portugal's goal is not merely to buy spices. Buying is what everyone does. The ambition is to command routes, impose passes, seize choke points, and make other traders pay for the privilege of moving through waters they had crossed long before Portuguese arrival. It is bold. It is profitable when it works. It is also rather rude, if one wishes to be understated. You step aboard a patrol vessel. The deck is hot beneath your feet. Cannon rest along the sides, their iron dark and sun-warmed. Powder smells faintly bitter. Rope fibres scratch your hand. The crew watches the horizon for sails. A merchant ship appears as a pale triangle in the distance, and at once the mood changes. Questions follow: whose ship, whose cargo, which papers, which port, which ruler, which faith, which rival, which excuse. The Carter's pass system turns paper into a weapon. A ship carrying proper documents may proceed, perhaps after paying duties or accepting conditions. A ship without them may face seizure. In theory, the system brings order. In practice, It creates tension across a sea already governed by many older customs and agreements. Arab, Gujarati, Malay, Persian, and other traders do not simply vanish because Portugal writes rules. They adapt, resist, negotiate, evade, and sometimes fight. A quirky tidbit hides in the bureaucracy of Spice Empire. Portuguese officials often complained about corruption, smuggling, private trading, and soldiers who preferred personal profit to royal discipline. Shocking. Truly. Imagine sending men across the world to guard treasure and discovering they developed their own interest in treasure. The crown wanted monopoly. Individuals wanted opportunity. The difference between official policy and actual behaviour could be as wide as the ocean itself. Historians still argue over whether Portugal's Indian Ocean Empire should be understood as a true monopoly, a naval protection racket, a loose commercial network, or a fragile overlay on older Asian trade systems. The answer depends on place and decade. In some ports, Portuguese power was formidable. In many waters, local merchants continued to move goods through alternate routes. The ocean was too large, the networks too old, and the traders too clever to be sealed shut by cannon alone. You move to Goa, where Portuguese power takes a more permanent shape. Streets twist between churches, markets, homes, and warehouses. The heat is thick, scented with spices, river mud, incense, flowers, livestock, and cooking smoke. Bells ring from church towers. Nearby, local markets continue with rhythms older than the fortresses. Women sell vegetables and rice. Artisans work in shaded doorways. Sailors stagger ashore with pay to spend and judgment to misplace. Goa becomes an administrative centre, a place where empire imagines itself orderly. Orders flow outward, reports flow back, taxes are collected, cases are heard, ships are licensed, religious institutions expand, families form across cultures, children grow up between languages. Empire is never only policy, it becomes daily life, awkward, intimate, unequal, and improvised. Yet the spice trade remains contested. The Portuguese try to pressure Calicut, support rival ports, bargain with rulers, and secure pepper supplies through treaties and force. They push toward Malacca to reach Southeast Asian spice routes. They eye Hormuz for Gulf trade. Each strategic point is a door, and every door leads to another corridor of politics. Controlling one harbour does not control every merchant's imagination. Smugglers, rivals, and seasonal winds keep offering alternatives. You stand at sunset on the fortress wall. The stone is warm under your palm, rough and grainy. Below, the harbour glows copper. Ships lie at anchor, their masts thin against the sky. A cargo boat moves slowly toward shore, carrying sacks that may be taxed, inspected, hidden, or misdeclared depending on the creativity of the evening. Cannon sit silent, heavy with threat. Ledger books wait inside, equally dangerous in their own sleepy way. Spices have now drawn Europe from craving into armed presence. The treasure that once moved through rumour and exchange is increasingly guarded by forts, contracts, passes, and guns. Yet even here, amid stone and cannon, the scent of pepper remains strangely gentle. It rises from a sack in the warehouse, dry and familiar, almost domestic. The same spice that warms soup can inspire blockades. The same clove that sweetens wine can attract fleets. Night spreads over the harbour. Lanterns flicker along the quay. You hear waves touching the fort's base. A soft, repeated sound beneath human ambition. Somewhere, a clerk closes his ledger. Somewhere, a sailor sharpens a knife. Somewhere, merchants whisper about another route. The Portuguese system stands powerful, restless, and never entirely secure, trying to discipline an ocean that has always preferred movement. You enter a counting house where the air is cool, dim, and stern. Outside, the harbour murmurs with tide and rope and gulls. Inside, everything smells of paper, ink, wax, damp wool, polished wood, and spice dust carried in on sleeves. Men bend over ledgers with the intense silence of people who believe numbers can conquer distance. In a sense, they are not wrong. A cannon can take a port, but a ledger can make that port pay regularly, which is much more satisfying to investors. This is the world of the Dutch East India Company, known as the VOC, a trading corporation with ships, soldiers, forts, clerks, shareholders, warehouses, courts, and a talent for turning fragrance into policy. It is not merely a group of merchants buying cloves and nutmeg. It is a machine built to concentrate profit, reduce competition, and squeeze the spice trade into contracts, quotas, patrols, and punishments. You stand near a table covered with documents. A clerk sharpens a quill. The small scrape seems harmless, almost sleepy. But the orders written here may travel across oceans and change lives on islands far away. Spice has entered a new phase. It is still bud, bark, seed, and fruit. But now it is also corporate strategy. The scent is sweet. The paperwork is not. A mainstream historical fact sits at the centre of this room: the Dutch East India Company. Founded in 1602, became one of the most powerful commercial organisations in early modern history. It was granted authority by the Dutch state to wage war, make treaties, build forts, and govern territories in pursuit of trade. In the spice world, it focused especially on controlling cloves, nutmeg, mace, and other valuable goods from Southeast Asia. You walk to the harbour at Amsterdam, where ships prepare for Asia. The sky's low and grey. Rain darkens the planks underfoot. Barrels thud onto decks. Sailors carry rope, salted food, beer, tools, weapons, trade goods, and private anxieties wrapped in silence. The smell is sharp with tar, wet timber, fish, smoke, and human effort. Investors may picture profits in clean columns, but the voyage begins in mud, cold, and shouting. The ships are larger and more organised than many earlier vessels, but the sea remains unimpressed. They sail around Africa, cross the Indian Ocean, stop at ports for water and repair, and push toward the island worlds where the most desired spices grow. Months pass in cramped quarters. Wood creaks. Rats conduct their own empire below deck. Men fall sick. Sails tear. The company promises order, but the ocean continues its ancient hobby of ruining plans. In Batavia, the Dutch headquarters in Java, the air changes completely. Heat rises from canals, streets, and roofs. The city smells of stagnant water, spices, sweat, smoke, cooking rice, wet earth, and warehouses packed with goods. Officials move between offices and storerooms. Soldiers guard gates. Merchants bargain. Enslaved and coerced labourers carry burdens through the humid streets. The VOC city is both commercial centre and colonial stronghold, orderly in its dreams, messy in its daily life. You enter a warehouse where cloves lie drying in dark heaps. The scent is deep, sweet, medicinal, and almost numbing. Nearby are nutmeg and mace from the Banda Islands, warmer and rounder in fragrance, like wood, sugar, and shadow. You touch a dried clove. It is hard, ridged, shaped like a tiny nail, so small, so quiet, so capable of attracting astonishing cruelty from people who really should have found a calmer hobby. The VOC wants monopoly. That means controlling production at the source and limiting supply so prices remain high. In the Banda Islands, this ambition becomes especially severe. Dutch forces seek to dominate nutmeg and mace production, replacing local control with plantation systems and coercive rule. The beautiful scent of nutmeg does not soften the violence around it. Sometimes history asks you to hold two truths at once: the spice is fragrant, and the system built around it can be brutal. A quirky tidbit lies in the company's obsession with destroying excess spice trees to protect high prices. Dutch officials sometimes ordered clove trees outside controlled areas to be cut down or uprooted. Imagine sailing halfway around the world, not only to grow spices, but also to stop other people from growing them. It is the kind of business logic that sounds absurd until you remember how monopolies work. Scarcity, when managed, becomes income. Historians still argue over how effective the VOC monopoly truly was across all of Southeast Asia. In some places, Dutch control was harsh and highly organised. In others, smuggling, local resistance, rival traders, and environmental limits weakened company plans. The official documents speak in commands and targets, but real islands contain storms, hidden coves, human defiance, and trees that do not read regulations. You walk through a spice plantation in the humid morning light. Nutmeg trees cast soft shade over dark soil. The leaves shine after rain. Workers move among the trunks, gathering fruit, sorting mace, drying seeds. The air smells lush and heavy, with sweetness turning almost dizzying under the heat. A bird calls from somewhere unseen. A blade cuts fruit open. The red lace of mace glows around the nutmeg seed like a little warning. The touch of the place is unforgettable. Wet leaves brush your arm. Mud clings to your sandal. A drying rack is warm from the sun. Nutmeg shells feel rough in your palm. Mace, when fresh, is soft and bright, almost too delicate for the violence of the market surrounding it. The trees grow slowly and quietly. The trade around them grows loud with guns, contracts, punishments, and ships. Back in Batavia, the ledgers multiply. The VOC tracks cargo, wages, losses, sales, spoilage, theft, shipwreck, disease, and private trade. Private trade is the company's recurring headache, because employees often discover that carrying a little spice for themselves can improve morale, by which they mean personal wealth. Official monopoly meets human temptation, and temptation has excellent sea legs. You pass a tavern near the docks. Sailors drink, cough, gamble, and exaggerate. The room smells of palm liquor, smoke, sweat, damp clothing, and fried food. A man claims he has seen an island where cloves grow so thick the air makes you sneeze from shore. Another insists a captain hid nutmeg in false barrels. A third says nothing, which usually means he knows the best story and has the sense not to sell it cheaply. The Dutch spice machine is efficient, but never effortless. It depends on shipbuilders in Europe, financiers in Amsterdam, soldiers in forts, officials in Batavia, sailors in storms, labourers in plantations, local rulers negotiating under pressure, and island communities living with the consequences. It also depends on European consumers who want spiced food, medicine, perfumes, and fashionable novelty. A household far away may grate nutmeg into a drink without hearing the cries hidden behind the supply chain. Evening falls over the harbour. The water turns copper, then black. Lanterns glow along the quay. A ship is loaded with chests and sacks bound for Europe. The cargo smells wonderful. That is the unsettling thing. Cloves and nutmeg do not smell like conquest. They smell warm, comforting, festive, almost tender. They smell like winter kitchens and sweet cakes and mulled drinks. Yet here, at the source of their early modern trade, they also smell of control. You stand beside the closed warehouse door as the final lock is set. The key turns with a small metallic click. Somewhere inside, spice waits in darkness, counted and claimed. The VOC has made a world where fragrance is measured by shareholders, guarded by forts, and shipped under armed sails. The treasure still begins in trees, but now it moves through a corporate empire, precise, hungry, and never quite able to sleep. You step into London under a low grey sky, where the river smells of mud, coal smoke, wet timber, fish, wool, and ambition just beginning to warm itself by the fire. The Thames moves slowly, crowded with boats, barges, and ships whose masts rise like a winter forest. Bells ring from church towers, cartwheels grind through muck, men shout over barrels being rolled toward warehouses. Somewhere, in a room smelling of ink and damp paper, a group of merchants believes there is still room at the spice table. England is not first to the feast. That is awkward, but not fatal. Portuguese ships have forced their way into the Indian Ocean. Dutch merchants are building a sharper, colder machine of monopoly. Venice has counted profits for generations. Spain has crossed oceans chasing the same fragrant prize. Yet English merchants look east and see opportunity, rivalry, and a chance to make money with the calm moral certainty merchants often discover near profit. You enter a meeting room where candles flicker against dark wood. The air is close with wool coats, wax, ink, and breath. Men speak of pepper, islands, routes, risks, and royal charters. They know the voyage will be long. They know storms, disease, hostile rivals, uncertain markets, and bad information can consume an investment completely. They also know pepper prices can make cautious men suddenly philosophical about danger. A mainstream historical fact rests in this smoky room. The English East India Company was granted a royal charter in 1600, giving it privileges to trade in the East Indies. Its earliest voyages focused heavily on spices, especially pepper, and it entered fierce competition with Dutch and Portuguese interests. Over time, its attention expanded toward textiles, tea, political influence, and territorial power. But pepper helped open the door. You walk down to the docks where an English ship prepares to sail. The deck is crowded with barrels of water, beer, salted meat, biscuit, trade goods, weapons, ropes, tools, and the usual supply of optimism packed too tightly. Sailors climb rigging with hands hardened by cold. The sailcloth snaps in the wind. Tar sticks to your fingertips when you touch the rail. Below deck, the smell is already sour, and the voyage has not yet had the decency to begin. Investors imagine the East as a place where pepper can be bought, loaded, and sold at a fine return. Sailors know the path there includes months at sea, cramped sleeping space, spoiled provisions, illness, leaks, discipline, boredom, and officers who may or may not deserve confidence. The company's charter sounds grand. The ship's hold smells like damp rope and onions. Both are true. As the vessel leaves the Thames, London fades into mist behind you. The river widens, the sea begins. Water slaps the hull in a rhythm that will become familiar, then tiresome, then strangely comforting. The ship moves south, toward warmer waters, then around Africa into seas already crowded with traders who are not especially waiting for English arrival. The English enter a world with rules, rivalries, languages, and established powers. They must bargain their way into it, sometimes with silver, sometimes with diplomacy, sometimes with cannon, and often with confusion wearing a brave face. At Bantam in Java, the air changes completely. Heat wraps around you like wet cloth. The harbour smells of cloves, pepper, rice, smoke, fruit, fish, and human labour. Chinese merchants, Javanese authorities, Malay sailors, Gujarati traders, Dutch rivals, and English factors all move through the commercial noise. The English are not masters here. They are one more group seeking cargo and advantage in a very crowded room. A company factor sits in a warehouse, sweating over letters. His desk is rough. His shirt clings to his back. Mosquitoes treat him as a public resource. He writes to London about prices, rivals, delays, supplies, and the irritating fact that reality has not arranged itself according to instructions sent from far away. Pepper sacks are stacked nearby, dry and dark, giving off a scent that cuts through dampness. Every sack matters. Every delay costs. A quirky tidbit belongs to the company's early obsession with pepper contracts. English merchants sometimes measured success in how much pepper they could secure, and one early voyage returned with enough profit to encourage further investment. Pepper became not just seasoning, but proof that the company could survive. Imagine building an institution that will eventually reshape continents, and at the start everyone is nervously asking, yes, but how many sacks of pepper did we get? History has a sense of humour, though not always a kind one. Historians still argue over when the English East India Company truly shifted from a commercial trading body into a territorial political power. Some point to later military victories in India. Others emphasize earlier habits of fort building, diplomacy, armed trade, and legal privilege. The transformation was gradual, uneven, and often improvised. The company did not wake one morning and become an empire. It accumulated power through appetite, accident, opportunity, and paperwork that slowly grew teeth. You move through an English factory, which is not a factory in the modern sense, but a trading station where company agents live, store goods, negotiate, and write endless letters. The room smells of pepper, damp wood, ink, wax, sweat, and mildew. A clerk copies accounts while a guard watches the doorway. Outside, porters lift cargo through heavy heat. The sound of weighing fills the space sacks dragged. Scales balanced, measures checked, voices rising when numbers offend someone. Rivalry with the Dutch sharpens everything. The Dutch pursue tighter control over cloves and nutmeg. The English struggle to gain footholds in the Spice Islands. Competition becomes tense, expensive, and sometimes violent. In some places, English ambitions fail. In others, they redirect. Pepper from India and Southeast Asia remains important, but textiles from India begin to look increasingly attractive. Cloth can be bought in huge quantities, sold widely, and used in trade for other goods. The table is changing, even while the spice jars still smell powerful. You stand in an Indian port where English merchants negotiate for pepper and cloth. The atmosphere is different from the island spice markets. Cotton textiles hang in brilliant colours. Dyers' vats smell of indigo, ash, oil, and wet fibre. Pepper sacks sit near bales of cloth, and the English begin to learn that Asia's wealth is not one treasure but many. Spices pulled them east, but textiles may hold them there. Commerce has a way of revising the dream once the buyer arrives. At night, in the company's quarters, a meal is served: rice, fish, perhaps lentils, perhaps a little meat seasoned with local spice and the fatigue of the men far from home. Outside, insects sing. Inside, candles gutter in damp air. A letter lies unfinished. The writer complains about heat, rivals, unpaid debts, missing goods, and the difficulty of managing people who are separated from London by oceans and months of silence. Empire, in its early form, often looks like irritation in ink. The English join the spice trade as latecomers, but latecomers can be dangerous. They learn from rivals, adapt to markets, court rulers, build forts, demand privileges, and turn commercial footholds into political claims. Pepper is their beginning, not their ending. The scent that rises from a sack in a humid warehouse will mingle with cotton, tea, silver, gunpowder, law, and conquest. You return in thought to London, where a merchant opens a chest and inhales the dry, sharp smell of imported pepper. Rain taps against the window. Coal smoke thickens the street. The spice has crossed oceans, storms, rival ports, and suspicious hands. It warms the room with distance. It also carries the first breath of an empire that will grow far beyond the spice it once chased. You enter a European kitchen where the old spice scents are still present. But new aromas have begun to crowd the room. The fire burns low and orange. Rain taps softly against the window. A kettle breathes steam over the hearth. On the table are familiar treasures: pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, ginger. Beside them sit newer comforts that are beginning to change everything: sugar, tea, coffee, and chocolate. The air smells warmer now, sweeter, darker. Cinnamon curls beside a cone of sugar. Nutmeg waits near a cup of hot chocolate. Coffee beans sit in a small dish, glossy and bitter, smelling of smoke and roasted earth. Tea leaves rest in a tin, dry and grassy, promising calm to people who will soon become very serious about kettles. Europe's appetite is widening. The spice trade no longer stands alone as the great theatre of taste. You lift a piece of sugar and feel its hard, grainy surface against your fingers. For centuries, sugar had been rare and costly in much of Europe, treated almost like a spice or medicine. Then plantation systems in the Atlantic world begin producing it on a larger scale, especially through brutal enslaved labour. The sweetness that seems gentle in the cup is tied to fields, mills, ships, chains, and ledgers. History has an unpleasant habit of hiding suffering inside desserts. A mainstream historical fact rests in this changing pantry from the 17th century onward. European consumption of sugar, coffee, tea, and chocolate increased dramatically, reshaping global trade. These goods joined spices within expanding commercial networks connecting Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Their rise shifted habits from occasional elite luxury toward more regular consumption among wider social groups. though access still depended heavily on class and region. You walk into a coffee house. The room is noisy, smoky, and alive with talk. Cups clink, chairs scrape, wet coats steam near the door. The smell of coffee rolls through the air, bitter and inviting, mixed with pipe smoke, ink, damp wool, and human opinion. That most renewable of resources. Men gather around tables to discuss trade, politics, news, science, gossip, war, stocks, shipping, and one another's foolishness. Coffee sharpens the mood. It does not lull. It wakes. Spices still appear here, but often as companions. Cinnamon may scent chocolate, nutmeg may be grated into punch or custard, cloves may warm wine, ginger may brighten cakes, pepper still seasons food with authority. Yet the centre of attention is shifting. The daily cup becomes important. Coffee houses turn imported plants into habits of conversation. Tea becomes a domestic ritual. Chocolate becomes luxury, then comfort. Sugar sweetens all of them and quietly becomes indispensable. You move to a tea table in a comfortable home. The room is calmer. Porcelain cups shine in candlelight. A spoon touches a saucer with a small, delicate sound. The tea smells grassy, floral, slightly smoky, depending on its source and preparation. Sugar softens it. Perhaps a little spice enters a cake served alongside it. The cloth on the table feels smooth beneath your hand. Outside, the street is muddy and cold, but inside the cup holds a whole empire of trade in one warm circle. Tea's rise brings Asian commerce into new focus, especially through trade with China and later production in other regions under imperial control. Coffee links Europe to the Ottoman world, Yemen, the Caribbean, and colonies across tropical lands. Chocolate begins in the Americas and moves through Spanish, then wider European tastes. Sugar plantations bind the Atlantic to forced labour on a terrible scale. What began as a story of spice routes becomes a larger global system of addictive comforts. A quirky tidbit sits inside the fashionable use of nutmeg. Wealthy Europeans sometimes carried small personal nutmeg graters, elegant little metal tools used at table or in taverns to add fresh spice to drinks. Imagine dramatically grating your own nutmeg over punch as if performing a tiny concert of sophistication. It is charming, unnecessary, and exactly the sort of behaviour people invent when luxury becomes portable. Historians still argue over how much these new drinks change European social life by themselves, and how much they simply rode along with broader changes in commerce, print culture, urban growth, colonialism, and finance. Did coffee houses create modern public debate? Or did they provide a convenient room for conversations already growing elsewhere? Did tea reshape domestic life? Or did it become popular because domestic rituals were already changing? The evidence is rich, but the causes are tangled, like teaspoons in a crowded drawer. You step into a confectioner's shop. The window glows with pale sweets, candied fruits, spiced biscuits, sugared nuts, and dark chocolate preparations. The smell is intoxicating: caramel, cinnamon, orange peel, cocoa, nutmeg, butter, smoke, and polished wood. A customer chooses carefully, pretending not to be dazzled. Sugar allows preservation, decoration, and extravagance. Spices give depth and warmth. Together, they create flavours that feel festive, intimate, and expensive, yet sweetness changes the meaning of spice. In older elite cooking, cinnamon, cloves, ginger, and pepper might appear in savoury sauces with vinegar, wine, and meat. As tastes shift, some spices move increasingly into desserts, drinks, cakes, puddings, and holiday foods. Not everywhere, not all at once, but strongly enough that later generations begin to associate them with comfort rather than status. Nutmeg becomes cosy, cinnamon becomes homey, clove becomes winter. Quite a career change, from global treasure to grandmother's kitchen. You walk through an Atlantic port where barrels of sugar arrive near crates of tea, sacks of coffee, bundles of tobacco, and old spice chests. The dock smells of molasses, salt water, rum, rope, smoke, wet wood, and human exhaustion. Ships connect plantation colonies, European markets, African coasts, Asian ports, and imperial offices, The world is now linked with terrifying efficiency. Goods move faster, profits grow, violence hides in the cargo lists. Spices help teach Europe to desire distance. Sugar, tea, coffee, and chocolate deepen that lesson into routine. A wealthy person no longer needs a rare banquet to taste the world. The world enters morning, afternoon, and evening habits. A cup of tea, a bowl of chocolate, coffee with sugar, a cake scented with cinnamon. Daily life becomes global without always admitting what that means. You return to the quiet kitchen as night settles. The fire is lower now. A hand grates nutmeg over warm milk. The scent rises soft and sweet, with a little woody heat. Rain continues its gentle tapping. The cup warms your palms. It feels peaceful. It is peaceful in this room. But inside that peace are ships, plantations, ports, wages, taxes, enslaved labour, skilled farmers, merchants, wars, and changing tastes. The old spice treasure has not vanished. It has been joined, surrounded, absorbed into a broader world of cravings. Pepper still bites, cinnamon still glows, clove still darkens the air with perfume, but now sugar sweetens the tongue, coffee wakes the mind, tea calms the afternoon, and chocolate thickens the evening. The pantry has become a map of global desire, and every warm cup carries more history than it politely lets on. You return to the household, where history has quietly climbed down from the rigging, stepped away from the fortress wall, closed the merchant ledger, and settled into a small glass jar near the stove. The room is simple and warm. A spoon rests beside a bowl. A kettle mutters softly. Morning light slips across a shelf where pepper, cinnamon, cloves, cumin, coriander, ginger, paprika, turmeric, nutmeg, and cardamom wait in a tidy row, looking innocent. Very innocent. Suspiciously innocent, considering all the trouble their ancestors caused. You open the cupboard and the air changes. The scent is familiar, domestic, comforting. But beneath it lies the memory of forest, monsoons, ports, plantations, caravans, storms, and bargaining tables. A modern spice jar seems ordinary because it is easy to buy, easy to replace, easy to forget. Yet the calm little label on the front hides centuries of movement. Once, these flavours could announce rank. Now, they sit beside flour, rice, and tea, ready for Tuesday dinner. You take black pepper first. The grinder feels smooth in your hand. When you twist it, pepper breaks with a small dry crackle, releasing its sharp, warm bite into the air. It lands on eggs, soup, vegetables, meat, noodles, beans, almost anything that needs waking up. Pepper no longer feels like treasure to many people. It feels basic. That is one of history's strangest transformations, the luxury so successful it becomes invisible. A mainstream historical fact belongs to this quiet shelf by the 19th and 20th centuries. Spices became far more widely available to ordinary consumers in many parts of the world because of expanding colonial plantations, global shipping, industrial processing, mass retail, and changing agricultural production. Goods once tied to elite trade in restricted regions entered common household use, though the labour and inequalities behind them did not disappear. The spice cabinet became democratic in appearance, even when the supply chain remained uneven. You move to cinnamon, a stick lies in your palm, dry and curled like a small scroll. Its surface flakes slightly under your thumb. The smell is sweet, woody, and warm, instantly linked in many minds to baking, breakfast, winter drinks, and comfort. Yet cinnamon does not belong to one culture or one mood. It has flavoured meat dishes, rice dishes, medicines, perfumes, sweets, stews, breads, and ritual preparations across many regions. Its modern sweetness is only one costume in a very long wardrobe. In one kitchen, cinnamon slips into apple pie. In another, it warms a lamb stew. Somewhere else, it scents rice pudding, tea, coffee, bread, or a festive dish served only on special days. Spices become local by being repeated. A flavour arrives from far away, then stays long enough to be claimed by memory. Eventually, people say, "This tastes like home," even when the plant itself grows under another sky. Home, apparently, has excellent import habits. You hear the sound of cumin seeds hitting hot oil. They crackle at once, releasing an earthy pool, smoky fragrance that fills the room with confidence. Onion follows, then garlic, then turmeric staining everything gold with the enthusiasm of a small sun. The pan hisses, steam touches your face. Your fingers feel the warmth of the stove. The atmosphere becomes thick, alive, and expectant. Spice is not decoration here, it is structure. It builds the dish from the ground up. In countless kitchens across South Asia, the Middle East, North Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, Europe, and the Americas, spices are not rare ornaments but everyday tools. They mark family style, regional identity, migration, class, religion, season, and personal preference. A recipe may be written down, but the real measure often lives in the hand. A pinch, a palmful, a little more, not that much. Stop, you will ruin it. This is scholarship transmitted by aunties, grandfathers, neighbours, street cooks, and anyone who has ever said, "You will know by the smell." A quirky tidbit rests inside paprika. Today it feels strongly associated with Hungarian cooking and Spanish smoked varieties, but the peppers used to make paprika came originally from the Americas. They travelled after European contact and were adopted so thoroughly in many cuisines that they now seem ancient to those places. A spice can immigrate, settle down, change its name, marry into local dishes, and become everyone's beloved relative. History, but tastier. Historians still argue over how to measure the influence of spices on everyday food habits, because recipes, trade records, cookbooks, household accounts, and oral traditions tell different kinds of truth. Written recipes often represent elite or literate households, while ordinary cooking may leave fewer records. A spice might be common in practice but rare in documents, or fashionable in books but less frequent in daily meals. The past cooked more than it wrote down, which is inconvenient but deeply understandable. You visit a street market in the present day. The ground is warm beneath your shoes. Vendors sit beside open sacks and jars, their displays arranged in colours so rich they seem almost musical. Red chili, yellow turmeric, brown cumin, green cardamom, black mustard seed, pale sesame, orange saffron strands, cinnamon sticks, dried bay leaves, star anise shaped like tiny wooden stars. The air is intoxicating. It smells of dust, fruit, frying oil, fresh herbs, plastic bags, exhaust, and spice clouds rising whenever a scoop dips into a sack. A vendor lifts a metal scoop through coriander seeds. They tumble with a dry whisper. Nearby, someone grinds chili, and the sharpness catches the back of your throat. You cough once, very elegantly, of course. A customer laughs because everyone has been defeated by chili at some point. Spice markets are social spaces as much as commercial ones. People ask advice, compare freshness, complain about prices, remember recipes, and buy small quantities of memory. Industrial spice production changes the experience again. Spices can be powdered, blended, packaged, standardized, shipped, and displayed under bright supermarket lights. Blends like curry powder, garam masala, ras el hanout, five-spice, pumpkin spice, jerk seasoning, berber, za'atar, and countless others carry layered histories of trade, empire, migration, adaptation, and marketing. Some are old in spirit, some are modern inventions dressed in tradition. Most are both more complicated and more interesting than their labels admit. You open a jar of nutmeg and grate a little over warm milk, custard, spinach, or coffee. The scent rises soft and round. It no longer feels like an object fought over by companies and empires. It feels like comfort. That comfort is real. So is the history behind it. The task is not to stop enjoying spices because their past is tangled. The task is to taste more honestly, to let pleasure and memory sit beside knowledge. Evening gathers around the kitchen. The stove ticks as it cools. A wooden spoon rests in the sink. Your hands smell faintly of garlic, cumin, and pepper even after washing. Outside, the world is large, hurried, and loud. Inside, A small jar closes with a soft click. The sound is ordinary, Des, but it holds a long journey. Spices have travelled from sacred smoke to royal banquets, from caravan sacks to company warehouses, from guarded islands to neighbourhood shops. Now they enter ordinary meals with quiet ease. A pinch disappears into soup, a seed blooms in oil, a bark sweetens a drink. The treasure has become intimate. It waits not in a palace, but in your cupboard, ready to turn hunger into memory. You stand in a quiet kitchen at night, with the world asleep beyond the window and a row of spice jars glowing softly under warm light. The room is still except for the low hum of a refrigerator, the faint tick of cooling metal, and the gentle sound of your own breathing. Outside, darkness presses against the glass. Inside, the air holds traces of dinner onion, pepper, warm oil, cinnamon, maybe a little ginger left on the cutting board. You lift a jar from the shelf. It is small, clean, almost weightless. A simple lid, a printed label, a measured price. Nothing about it appears dangerous. Nothing says that similar scents once pulled ships into storms, filled royal treasuries, shaped colonies, stirred rivalries, and made merchants guard secrets with the dedication of people who had discovered that mystery raises prices. The jar looks calm. History, as usual, has excellent camouflage. You open it. The scent rises at once. Perhaps it is clove, dark and sweet, with that faint medicinal bite that makes the air feel polished. Perhaps it is cumin, warm and earthy, smelling of toasted fields and hot pans. Perhaps it is cardamom, green, floral, and cool, like a garden after rain. Whatever it is, the room changes. The fragrance moves invisibly, touching the walls, the table, your hands, your memory. Spice is tiny, but it never behaves as if it is small. A mainstream historical fact rests in this quiet moment. Spices helped drive long-distance trade for thousands of years and became one of the major incentives behind European maritime exploration from the 15th century onward. The search for direct access to pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and other aromatics encouraged voyages around Africa, across the Atlantic, and into the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Spices did not act alone, of course. Gold, faith, politics, rivalry, textiles, land, and power all mattered. But spice was one of the fragrant sparks that helped ignite a global age. You close your fingers around the jar and feel the smooth glass against your palm. It is cool at first, then warmed by your skin. The spice inside may have been grown by farmers you will never meet, harvested under a sun far from your window, dried in air full of insects and dust, sorted by hand or machine, packed, shipped, processed, blended, sold, and finally placed here beside your stove, even now when supply chains are faster and quieter. The old truth remains: flavour travels through human labour. The treasure that began as bark, bud, seed, root, resin, or flower has never been only about taste. It has been about distance. A spice carries the place where it grows, but also the places it passes through. Rain clings to pepper. Volcanic soil lingers in nutmeg. Dry wind follows frankincense. River mud, dock smoke, warehouse dust, and kitchen steam all become part of the story. You cannot see these layers, but you can almost breathe them. There is a strange intimacy in that. Empires are large, maps are cold, trade statistics are sleepy little beasts, but a pinch of spice touches the tongue directly. It makes history bodily. You do not merely learn it, you taste it. Pepper warms your mouth, cinnamon sweetens your breath, chili sparks your lips, turmeric stains your fingers yellow and refuses to leave politely. Clove numbs the tongue just a little, as if whispering that comfort and medicine were once neighbours. A quirky tidbit belongs to one of the most ordinary objects in the room, the pepper shaker. In many modern dining settings, salt and pepper sit together as if they are equals, the classic tabletop pair. Yet salt is a mineral found in many parts of the world and necessary for life, while black pepper is a tropical vine fruit that became globally common through trade, empire, and agriculture. One came from earth and sea, the other climbed in humid forests. Somehow they ended up beside each other, like an old married couple on a restaurant table. History can be oddly domestic. Historians still argue over how much weight to give spices as a cause of global exploration, compared with broader economic and political forces. Some emphasize spice profits and Europe's hunger for direct access to Asian markets. Others point to bullion shortages, religious competition, naval technology, state formation, and the search for prestige. The fairest view is layered. Spices did not single-handedly launch every ship, but they made the horizon smell profitable, and when the horizon smells profitable, people begin building fleets. You look now at a modern supermarket aisle. Bright lights shine on neat rows of bottles and packets. Ground cinnamon, black pepper, curry powder, Italian seasoning, chili flakes, garlic powder, smoked paprika, turmeric, vanilla, cloves, coriander, mixed spice. The shelves are orderly, almost too orderly. They turn centuries of danger into convenience. A person can buy a flavour once worth a fortune, toss it into a basket with soap and cereal, and continue walking. No caravan, no royal licence, no sea monster rumour required. Very efficient, slightly ungrateful, completely understandable. Yet the scent remains. That is the astonishing part. Systems change, prices fall, empires rise and vanish, trade routes shift, ships become containers, ledgers become databases. But cinnamon still smells like cinnamon. Clove still darkens the air. Pepper still wakes the tongue. The sensory thread survives the noise around it. You sit at a table with a warm drink in your hands. Perhaps there is nutmeg on top, or cinnamon, or cardamom crushed into tea. Steam rises and brushes your face. The cup warms your palms. Somewhere in that little cloud is a memory of ancient temples, Roman kitchens, Indian harbours, desert roads, Venetian warehouses, Portuguese ships, island groves, Dutch ledgers, English trading rooms, plantation fields, street markets, family kitchens, and quiet cupboards. The history of spices is not only the history of exploration. It is the history of wanting flavour, wanting healing, wanting holiness, wanting wealth, wanting control, wanting to make ordinary life feel touched by somewhere else. Some of that wanting created beauty recipes, rituals, shared meals, gardens, poetry, fragrant rooms. Some of it created suffering conquest, coercion, monopoly, extraction, and violence hidden behind sweetness. The spice jar asks you to hold both truths gently. Now the kitchen grows softer, the light seems lower, the shadows kinder. You close the jar and set it back on the shelf. The lid makes a small, final sound. Outside, the night continues without hurry. Inside, the scent remains a little longer, floating in the air like a story that has finished speaking but has not quite left the room. You breathe in slowly. The world feels vast, but not sharp now. It feels folded, like a map put away after a long journey. The spice routes settle into silence. The ships rest in dark harbours. The caravans pause beneath cold stars. The forests drip with rain. The kitchens cool. Across time, hands release seeds, tie bundles, lift sails, weigh sacks, stir pots, pour tea, and pass bowls from one person to another. And now, gently, the treasure becomes simple again. A little warmth in the cup, a little fragrance on the fingers, a little memory in the dark. The long roads fade, the sea grows quiet, the lamps along the harbour dim one by one, and the night carries the last soft scent of cinnamon, pepper, clove, and rain. You do not need to follow it any farther. Let it drift, let it settle. Let the room become calm around you, until all those old winds are only a slow breath, and all those distant markets are only a dream.